Men get hit on by creeps too. The secret crap that some men deal with daily. I was walking downtown with a friend when two drunk girls came out of a bar, and one of them just walked up to me and shoved her hand up my shirt and started rubbing my chest. She was yelling to her friend, "This is what a real man feels like." My friend was laughing his butt off, and her friend was explaining that this was breakup therapy, because she had been dumped and she was in the process of accepting that there are better men out there. I laughed it off and took it as a compliment, but imagining the gender roles reversed always stuck with me. Worked in bars and would constantly be grabbed by older women who thought it was funny. Also, as a Scottish piper, kilt lifting is a thing and honestly it needs to stop. Grow up. My aunt literally slapped a woman across the face for doing this crap at my cousin's wedding. My bulge was a topic of open discussion between some of the women in the office at a previous job. The kicker is that one of the women was our HR and reporter of any unwanted attention in the office. The HR woman at my old job was caught with candid photos of guys' butts on her phone. Not really low grade, but when I used to work as a lifeguard on the beach, there was lots of non-consensual touching. The two that really stick out for me are the middle-aged woman who walked up to me like she had a question and then got a hold of my eggplant through my trunks because she wanted to see how big it was, and the 16-year-old who backed me into my stand and shoved a Skittle into my mouth with her tongue. I'm surprised you never got Wendy peppercorned. In 20 years of lifeguarding, rescuing someone only ever got me action once. Offshore wind blew her and our friend out to sea about 200 to 300 yards in an inflatable raft, and I went and fetched them. Later back on shore, we had a drink, and later had fun. I mean, it's not daily, but as a cosplayer who does shirtless characters like Ace, Grimjoe, and Barn, I get grabbed a bit. Chest and arms mostly. Also, my butt gets slapped and squeezed, and crotch grabs are often enough to mention too. Heck, even when I'm armored, they find a way to get to me. I must have been protected by the power of ugly, or I just didn't notice it. I know this kind of thing happens, I guess not to me, thankfully. Ditto! Yay for us uglies. I think the closest I've had were boozy middle-aged gals hitting on me while I was working bar, but there was nothing touchy about that, so all good. Just the discomfort that's a shadow of what most women in the same industry deal with. One day I got a text message from someone that I didn't know asking me to meet for dinner. I'd gone to a new haircut place a few days earlier. One of the hairdressers, not the one who cut my hair, had seen me and decided it made sense to look up my phone number from the client records and ask me out. I had no idea who this was, it was so weird. I got several more messages from her before she stopped messaging me. Never went back to that hair place. A female co-worker. I told her if she was male, she would have been fired multiple times for her behavior. She just laughs and says, "Yeah, probably." I mean, that's terrible. Sometimes I think people legitimately don't realize their behavior is unacceptable. But the fact that she's been given the opportunity to apologize and just admitted that her behavior was wrong and not take it seriously is terrible. My 55-year-old co-worker somewhat resembles Ursula from The Little Mermaid. That hasn't stopped her from asking me if I think she's pretty, asking me to take her home, and telling me she sprays like a watering can. Yes, those are her exact words. I should add that I'm 21, which I think makes it a lot weirder. Okay, update, she's handed in her resignation. I recently became a father and was working on a hit TV series. A female producer, who's best friends with the executive in charge, thought it would be funny to grab my stomach and say, "Working on your dad bod already?" My daughter at that point was 1 week old. If I grabbed a woman's stomach and said she was fat or pregnant, I would have been fired. Well, I complained to make a point. She recently was promoted and I wasn't invited back after 5 seasons. I sent our higher-ups screen grabs of her apology and was told they'd look into it. This was over a year ago, and since she was promoted. I work plenty, but it's a gross business. A woman just straight up grabbed my equipment while I was working at a festival. My friend, who knew her, told me not to make a scene as she was upper management. I mean, I still would've. Screw it. I'm so freaking bothered by how literally every answer is either "someone grabbed my ding-dong" or "someone slapped my butt." Gross. I mean, this isn't low grade. This is SA. All of it. Almost every response here is an actual assault. Try dressing in a traditional Scottish kilt in a city without some woman lifting it to see if you've got underwear on. We all think it's funny until a guy does it to a woman. I was going to say the same thing. You'd think wearing a kilt was a bloody invitation. Some middle-aged guest did this when I was at a wedding. I was, a fair bit younger than her. Thinking back on it, that's frickin' disgusting. I've been referred to HR for my voice being naturally too low. I was told I need to try to do more to be inclusive at the chat with HR about it. I mean, you're different, be more inclusive is a weird line to be told. We're singling you out for being different. Try to be more inclusive. No, you should reverse that crap on them and start saying how screwed they are if corporate ever finds out you're being discriminated against for a natural feature of your body. My mother-in-law assumes that men have this complete inability to control themselves and it's 100% up to women to not pursue attached men. I wasn't aware of this until there was a debate going on about such things at a family function, when she asked me, the only non-old male at the event, to confirm her belief. The implication that men are practically wild animals and unable to control themselves is pretty insulting. My family owns a restaurant and I'd help out doing the dishes and operating front of house. My mum mainly hired female waitresses for some reason, and I overheard things like, "Oh, he's cute. I wonder what it's like to ride Asian guys." And one time, one of the girls finished their shift and I was brushing the floor near the entrance. She came up to me and straight up grabbed me with a lip bite. I was really uncomfortable as I had a girlfriend at the time. I stalked them on social media for a bit and found out they were really into K-pop, and one of them had a history dating Asian guys. They eventually quit as they had A-levels to prepare for, the equivalent to AP, and because I live in a small town, I bump into them a lot, meaning they stare whenever I walk past them. I only recently found out about the widespreading trend of obsessing over Korean guys. I keep hearing all kinds of similar stories to your own. Weird to think K-pop is inspiring this kind of behavior. I guess some people just can't tell reality from fantasy, though. Getting physically and verbally attacked by women in nightclubs and then being asked to leave because of it. Even with multiple people trying to tell bouncers what was actually happening, they'll always just pick you to throw out. I've had my arms felt up and any given area of my downstairs too. It's not as flattering or hot as you might think it is when you're not expecting it or in the mood. It just kinda creeps you out. I've also had a woman just grab me and plant a full-on open-mouth kiss straight on me, and then act offended when I pulled away and basically ran from her. Never saw or talked to her before that moment. I was in the store, and an old woman on a mobility scooter wanted to pass me, so I stepped to the side against the shelf. Instead of using all the free space on the other side, she starts turning closer to me as she passes, so my downstairs rubs all across her shoulder, and she made a weird moaning sound at the same time. I posted about this on Facebook at the time, and almost everyone thought it was hilarious. I felt pretty gross. Had a female work colleague sit on my lap during my lunch break, asking for help, batting her eyelids and all. Now, I wonder what would happen if I'd have sat on her lap. This happened to a guy at my work. He's 50 years old, married, with kids. We were having Friday drinks after work, at work. We were a liquor retailer. The girl was 23 and very cute. She decided to sit in his lap in front of everyone. He got up very quickly and left. His wife sometimes worked for us, and so did his sons. He did not invite this attention. She thought it was funny. Well, I was going to mention all the attention my moobs get, but it used to be all the time drunk women or men would run their fingers through my beard and have some sly comment like, I wonder if this tickles. Yeah, I used to have some pretty decent moobs. When some guys would get real drunk, they'd bean dip me and touch or flick under them, which started to get embarrassing. I'm around 6'7", but I'm super nice, so people think they can get away with it. I decided that when a guy puts his hand on me or flicks my moobs or whatever, I take that as an invitation to put my very large hands on them. Now when there's a moob flick or anything like that, I go ahead and exclaim, "Oh, hell yeah!" and excitedly and semi-aggressively grab their chest with both of my very large hands. Nobody flicks my moobs anymore. I wasn't sure if this counted, but this is a form of unwanted attention, so honestly, why not? Also, love the theatricality of your response. Seems to be a good deterrent from what you've said. Okay, back to the upsetting stories. 32-year-old male with an athletic build. At every job I've had, co-workers and customers have always openly grabbed my arms, smacked or squeezed my butt, and made comments about my appearance that would get me fired if I said them to women. My husband's a server at a high-end restaurant. I know restaurants are restaurants everywhere when it comes to staff, and I've worked in plenty, but he's told me that he gets problematic behavior pretty much every day. Either hit on pretty openly by customers despite the wedding ring, or being grabbed or rubbed or commented on by his coworkers. I'm so sorry you've gone through that. It's absolutely not fair. I hope it ends for you because I know even if you said something firm and simple like no or don't touch me, it's already been done and nothing really changes. I worked at a quasi-governmental agency and we hired a young guy fresh out of college. The director, who's a woman, walked into the room one day, walked up behind him, put her hands on his shoulders and literally started rubbing his chest. This was like 3 years ago. He just sat there frozen like a deer in the headlights. I kind of lost my crap and said, what if he was female and a male walked up behind her and started rubbing her shoulders like that? She looked at me like I had 2 heads. I didn't stay at that job very long. Holy crap. Hopefully neither did that guy. He didn't. He was recently married and everybody knew about it. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? I'm not a man, but it's something my male manager has highlighted to me. I worked in a hospital as a therapist, mainly with elderly people. Old men make creepy comments or even try to touch female nurses and therapists all the time, and when they do, we raise it as being creepy and usually go to see him with another person. We tell the patients that it's not appropriate to speak to us like that. Recently, there was a female patient who kept making comments about the male staff, and everyone just laughed it off. No one told the female patient off. Some of the female staff even agreed and egged her on. It wasn't until my manager raised it as an issue that it made me stop and think. If the roles were reversed, we'd be taking precautions to make the female staff feel safe, but there wasn't anything like that in place for male staff. Not daily basis anymore, but when I was a nursing student a few years back, it was quite common that older female patients would tell me that this is so nice to be touched by a young man again. Some even commented about their big old lady chests and how most men do like that. Needless to say, I was extremely uncomfortable and disgusted, but I was about 20 years old and had no life experience, so I just accepted it as part of the job. On the upside, I'm now biotech grad and medical student, and as I'm a little older, I take no crap from any patient, male or female, and have zero problems publicly shaming every single patient who talks to a nurse that way. I don't know if it's in the same category, but women just touching my hair without asking happens all the time. I have really long hair, but I can't imagine most women would be okay if some guys just started playing with their hair at a bar. If they just ask my permission, I'm usually cool with it. The worst was the chick who grabbed my braid and started yanking me around. Thankfully, 4 women rescued me. I don't even know why that chick was mad at me. She was just angry that I had long hair, and extremely drunk, I guess. I almost had to punch her. It was so confusing. I've had some weird experiences too. I was eating in a pizza ranch with my dad as a 17-year-old, and one of the waitresses walked up behind me and just grabbed my hair and commented on how nice it was. This happened as I'd just taken a huge bite of pizza. It was so awkward. My dad was like, do you know her? She was cute and I was really flattered, but at the same time, what the frick? My husband has complained that there's this societal assumption that men are dogs who always want to do the deed, and as such, several times he's not had his marital status respected. Women he's basically just been nice to in the past have made comments like, yeah, he's in love with me, he'd do anything for me, openly in front of him. They've sent him messages prompting infidelity and have even sent him undressed images. There's a confidence that they can steal him not only from me, but his past relationships because men cheat is just such a big assumption. His favorite thing to say is, the only thing I cheat on is my diet. The ever-present assumption that the end goal of all of my interactions is doing the deed. I can't even be friendly to children without someone assuming I'm some sort of creep. As an example, I work for a solar company and we fly drones to get 3D models of buildings we'll potentially be working on. Well, the other day I went to a site assessment at an elementary school, so I pulled up in my nice white truck with our company logo all over it, wearing a hat and hoodie with our company logo on that too. Now, the people in charge know I'm coming, so we speak on the phone and they give me the go-ahead to come and fly the drone. I start flying the thing around the school, taking pictures when recess apparently started. I didn't think anything of it until about 15 minutes later when 2 female teachers walked up to me and very pointedly and accusingly asked me, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" So I explain the situation to them, point out the truck and the clothes with the company logo, and give them the name of the administrator I've been working with. And their response was, "Well, you can understand how this looks bad, right?" No, I'm sure I can't realize it looks bad because I'm just doing my job. I'm not here to be an awful human just because I'm male. F off with your wild assumptions. I used to be a butcher when I was in my 20s. Every day was full of housewives making innuendos like, "I can't wait to wrap my lips around that sausage," or "I really look forward to getting my hands on your rump." They also seemed keen to up the ante every time too. Every single day. I just smiled and carried on, but it was always uncomfortable. No idea why it's completely acceptable to them. I don't imagine they were like that to many other people. I don't want to dismiss your experiences. This does actually sound lewd and intentional. I'm just imagining an alternate scenario where these women are just incredibly unaware of how raunchy they sound and are genuinely just looking forward to cooking and eating their dinners. Like just a whole bunch of female Tobias Funkes, unintentionally spouting innuendo wherever they go. Women always smack or touch my butt. I've also caught women taking pictures of it. I know if the tables were flipped, I'd probably be in jail. I had this happen when I studied my bachelor's degree. Women that I barely knew but were my co-students would clap or touch my chest and touch my arms in situations that did not call for it. I always thought it was super weird. In hindsight, I thought they were flirting, but they pretty much all had boyfriends and none of those guys looked like me. Them being super academic types, me coming straight from the army and being a fairly big dude, I guess. I used to work in the entertainment industry where I wore a kilt a lot of the time. Couldn't believe how many drunken women thought it was perfectly okay to stick their hands up under it and grab a handful of me, sometimes pretty aggressively too. I quickly stopped freestyling and wore boxers or compression shorts, and this would lead to the grabbers shouting out, "This loser is wearing pants!" before mocking me to their pals. Oh, and far too often my kilt was lifted for anyone in eyeshot to see my junk. Yet when I pointed out how much trouble I'd be in for pulling the same crap with them, I'd get looked at like I was being feckin' ridiculous. Scotsman here, just so you know, freestyling is not as common as you might think around here, from the times I felt confident or bevved enough to ask, and it's actually banned from certain events such as dances, since accidentally showing yourself where there might be kids is a bridge too far for tradition. Had a female manager get into my unlocked phone, send my undressed photos to herself, and then share them with the other female manager. I was 24 at the time, and both managers were younger. At the time, I honestly didn't know how to feel about it, so I just shrugged it off with bravado because they were both attractive, so what the hell? But now I realize that attractiveness isn't a free pass for invading someone's privacy like that. Don't even get me started about being a straight male hairdresser. I was once dressed as a priest in a party, and this girl, out of the blue, said, "I want Father's holy staff," while trying to grab my crotch. I quickly moved to avoid it, and she said, "What, are you gay?" Well, I am, but just because a guy avoids having his Johnson grabbed, it doesn't mean he's gay. Maybe they just don't want to be touched by you, Tracy. Classic Tracy. Yes, Tracy, those vows of celibacy aren't just for show. Ugh, just the universal idea that we're always the hunters and never the prey. Something magical happens at 35 where suddenly the guys are avoiding the women and the women are hunting the guys. Listen, lady, I get that you want it, but I've got stuff to do, and even after that, the adult movies I enjoy are less demanding, so keep walking. I'm not really sure if it counts or not, but as a male who used to be extremely overweight, I'd always have people, both guys and girls, trying to touch my moobs. It made me self-conscious and uncomfortable, and I voiced that, but people continued to do it. They'd grab them or hit them, and pretty much anything in between. It happened very frequently as well, but I guess nobody saw a problem with it, whether it was because I was a guy or because it wasn't a traditional form of inappropriate treatment. I'm gay, and I've been frequently told by women I've worked with over the years that they could fix me. One of them was a manager. No, there's nothing to fix, and you can F right off with that. I don't tell a straight guy he hasn't met the right eggplant yet, so don't tell me I haven't met the right hoo-ha yet. As a straight girl with a gay male best friend, the frickin' weird daily comments by so-called progressive people are getting out of hand. It's like a bunch of straight girls got into Raoul's Drag Race and think it's okay to treat every gay dude like he's a performing drag queen. Everywhere we go together, he gets, "Yes, queen," or "You look gorgeous, hun," from total strangers, and they think it's okay to touch him or brazenly comment on his body or orientation. Like, what the frick? He's a 36-year-old Mormon man, not a frickin' toy. Talk to him the same way you talk to literally anyone else. So frustrating. I'm so sorry you have to go through this so often as well. 28-year-old male in an office predominantly with women. I'm 6'3" and athletic. Especially the older ladies will touch my shoulders in a way that's not friendly and more to touch. I also received pretty gnarly comments when I lost a little weight. They also say stuff like, "Men are the weaker gender," or something like that. I blacked out at work from an irregular heart rhythm, and they all said, "That's such a man thing." That doesn't even cover everything, but it is a start. Have you ever met a real-life savant who didn't realize that they were a genius? We have a paid summer internship program for juniors and seniors pursuing construction management degrees. 5 years ago, we had a young woman come into the program in her junior year. She was very tiny in stature and very quiet, but we soon learned giant in intellect, and loud where it counted. The way we operate is each intern will spend 3 weeks on a different project, learning a different role within the organization, then 3 weeks on site as a superintendent intern, 3 weeks on site with safety, 3 with project management, and 3 on site with quality control. After each period, I received a call praising her ingenuity and ability to adapt and improvise in any situation. At the end of the internship, we had a plus delta review of their performance, and based on that review, we make a determination of whether to offer them a place the following summer. In the case of a senior, we determine if we want to extend them a full-time employment offer. Every review she received from each department all said the same thing: hire her now. We extended an offer for a salaried position, part-time, from that point through her senior year, along with tuition reimbursement. This young lady still amazes everyone every single day. She's 25 years old, making an amazing salary and absolutely dominating any project she's given. If she doesn't know it today, she'll practically be an expert tomorrow. She's incredibly impressive. I can see her having my job one day, that of operations director. Hopefully it's after I retire, though. Criminal defense lawyer here. I had a client who was a low-level substance dealer and weapon runner. Most street-level guys have a very different kind of intelligence that doesn't translate all that well to the white-collar world. Many of my clients ask to read case law, and I've only really met one of them who could digest it and discuss it intelligently with me. This guy. He'd do his own research from the jail, which isn't uncommon, but this guy did it well and would actually send me relevant cases that were helpful to the issues in his case. And when I explained to him why some were not helpful, he got it. He asked good questions and used that discussion to inform future research. There are a lot of inmates who consider themselves jailhouse lawyers, and this guy was smart enough to actually be one. I think about him a lot, and I wonder what his life would have been like if he was fortunate enough to be afforded the same opportunities during childhood that I enjoyed. Good on you for realizing that even the ones who aren't as brilliant as this guy were just a different kind of intelligence rather than being specifically like him. A lot of us write off people who aren't good at our niche skills as being idiots, so it's a good thing to keep in mind. My dad grew up believing that he was dumb and would never amount to anything. His teachers all hated him, and the first time he went to university, he was kicked out. Around the same time as I started university, my mum finally convinced him to try again to get a higher education himself. He's often said he's too stupid to go back to school, but he speaks about 6 languages fluently and has so many interesting history factoids that whenever we watch any movie, we always have to pause at least 4 times for a lengthy discussion about it, and he remembers more book quotes than anyone I've ever met. He grew up in communist Hungary and East Germany, and has since then climbed mountains and been scuba diving in the Atlantic, among a bunch of other adventures. Whatever the discussion, he's got a story to tell. He's the coolest dad ever, but for as long as I can remember, my family has struggled financially since he couldn't get a job that paid well enough. It makes me so happy that he's finally reaching his full potential now at 51 years old, and we're all really proud of him. He dreams of being a teacher one day. He will be the best teacher his future students could ever wish for. People who are just naturally great teachers without actually being educators. I've always thought people who could teach others are incredibly smart because they're aware enough of what they know to present it to others in a way that they can understand it. This guy I used to work for was a phenomenal teacher of all things paint, powder coating, and color matching and blending. He had a real passion for it, and it showed in the manner in which he taught and demonstrated what he was talking about. In saying that, he was also very highly strung and had some mental health issues that held him back from doing great things, and so believed he was an idiot. I mean, he wasn't, but no amount of telling him would help. I had a kid in my class that never took anything seriously, skipped class, brought booze to class, and did numerous other things. You name it, he probably did it. But man, this motherfricker knew his stuff whenever he did pay attention. He understood things when other people were struggling to learn whatever was being taught that day, be it math, science, English, or reading. It makes me a little sad because he was always a troublemaker, but deep down I knew that he was just very smart and capable of doing good in school. He just chose to never do it, or generally just didn't care. I don't know at this point. I think he got involved with the wrong crowd early on, unfortunately. Former coworker of mine. He came to Germany as a refugee in his young teenage years and had trouble in school due to the language barrier. Also poor support, a tough family situation, kind of typical refugee problems. Then he was unemployed and Job Center, part of German welfare dealing with unemployment, sent him to the security company that I worked for at the time because conditions of employment are almost non-existent in this field. When he was on my team for an event, I, as team leader, had to show him the ropes. The event lasted 10 consecutive nights and we faced several different challenges that were part of the job. Every now and again, he had a genius idea of how to solve a particular problem. The following year, I got him on my team whenever I could, trained him, and when I left the company, he inherited my position as team leader. I don't actually know whether he knew about how smart he is, but he was so insecure in the beginning that I boldly assume he didn't. When I was in uni, I took part in a project called Inside Out, where we would go in a prison and have criminology lessons with the inmates who we called inside students. We didn't teach them or observe them, we were all learning together. And this one guy was just a genius. He had this way of describing a phenomenon that he'd noticed and thought about without realizing that it was an actual theory that existed. Like, we'd studied them in class, so we knew about them, but he'd just come up with it from personal experience. From labeling theory to functionalism, he'd just outlined them like he'd thought of them in the shower. It was extraordinary. He was also a bit unstable and prone to bursts of anger, often towards himself. He seemed to become frustrated very easily if he couldn't explain or understand something perfectly. And then one day he just stopped showing up. I ended up talking to the guards, who told me that he felt like he was too stupid for the class. Seriously, he was convinced that we were all smarter than he was, and that he wouldn't be able to keep up. I don't know if they ever did, but we asked the guards and a few inside students if they'd tell him that we loved studying with him, that he was starting really interesting discussions and that his observations always made us think more deeply, that his presence made the class better. And just to be clear, I don't mean to say that he was smart for someone in prison. This guy was a genius. Everyone but him knew that he was by far the most intelligent person in the room, but he didn't see it. We were told that they'd ask if he could participate the following year, and I really hoped that he did. As a teen, I worked for a video rental place, like Blockbuster, but not. My manager spoke 5 languages and did all of the accounts without the need of a calculator. I asked him why he was just a manager at a movie rental place. He could be making a lot of money doing anything else. He told me, "Making less money is the price of my happiness." That always stuck with me. Someone mentioned this already, but people who can easily teach others complex systems or ideas. My husband is one such person. Microbiologist, workflow management, and plays D&D on his downtime. He can analyze a difficult concept, distill the relevant information, and make it easily accessible to someone and teach it in a patient, unassuming manner quickly without making the other party feel stupid or uninformed. And he's modest as hell. He has no idea how hard it is to educate people, never trying to one-up or show off his knowledge. He's charismatic and emotionally intelligent. He honestly has no idea how rare his level of kindness and intelligence are in others. He's the best person I've ever met. That wonderful mix of being intelligent, humble, and incredibly kind. What a unicorn. Your husband sounds dreamy. Is he single? Oh, wait, yeah. I'm clearly not among the people being described in this video. My mother. She was raised in a poor, troubled family and left school very early to escape. Even now, she'll say she's uneducated, which is true, but she sure ain't stupid. She raised a bunch of us without much money and has always been resourceful and canny at making ends meet. She can do fairly complicated math in her head, does extensive research before making large purchases, forwards me screenshots that are quite sophisticated scam emails and tells me why they're fake, and she's 78 now and has always embraced new tech. She has no trouble using her smartphone or her PC. She even troubleshoots for her neighbors. She still lives on the same poverty-stricken area we grew up in, and she's often helping her neighbors advocate for themselves, writing letters, telling them who to contact and what to say. She's also a keen observer of people. She sees them as they are and takes them as they are with no judgment. She was always progressive for her time and passed down zero racism or other prejudices to us kids. I wonder what she could have done if she had the opportunities that she made damn sure we had. Your description is very like my grandma. She passed away 2 years ago at 81. 8th grade education, which was normal at the time for the area because her parents were farmers. At one point, she worked a sewing job where they were paid by the piece, and Grandma worked so fast that they changed the rule and started paying by the hour because she was earning too much money. She ran their dairy farm, plus corn and soybean fields, cattle, pigs, chickens, and all the equipment, often paying additional hired help. Grandpa didn't really know how to manage the books, so Grandma did it all. After they retired, she had a smartphone before I did. She also had a huge 90s desktop computer and printer. One time, probably about 5 years or so ago, we were playing cards and she pulled out these professional, nice-looking scoring sheets. I thought she must have purchased them somewhere. No, turns out she made them and figured out how to scan copies. I didn't know she even had a scanner. When I told her I was surprised, she was annoyed at me and was like, "Hey, I know how to do stuff. I do this and this and this for the neighbors and this for that and the other thing," ranting about her elite computer skills. I had no idea, and I was like, "Grandma, do you know I'm pretty sure my mum couldn't do some of the stuff you're talking about?" She also had plenty of stories about identifying and thwarting scammers, especially the door-to-door kind. She liked to smile and waste their time, and then when she refused to buy in whatever they were selling, they got angry and she'd play dumb and offended and laugh about it later. She was also progressive in a very heavily conservative area. Man, I miss her. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I'm volunteer staff at a math summer camp targeted at children who like doing math. Most of the kids that we get are the standard doing well in school with grades to prove it sort of kids, but it frequently happens that some kid has signed up and the parents just tell us that their child doesn't really do well in school in general, or math in particular, but they just like doing math-related puzzles. That's cool, because that's all we ask for. And often enough, these kids come in with very interesting insights and solutions because they happened to approach the problems from different angles than the majority. They might be quite intelligent, but not in a way that expresses itself well within the standard framework of education. The same thing happens on the EQ social level. A few years back, we got a sign-up where the parents warned us that their son had great difficulties making friends or socializing in general. On the first day of camp, the kid took a chessboard and went to sit down to play against himself. Perfectly fine. But not much later, another boy walked up to him and asked if he could join the game. They start playing and talking, and they end up being practically inseparable the rest of the week. The kid that just had difficulties making friends just made a new best friend faster than anyone else there. You just need to give folks the right environment. In my first year of uni, or college, I sat next to a quiet girl who never thought of herself as smart. This is while everyone else was loud about what they knew and acted like they were top of the class, when they really weren't. She never really showed off her knowledge. We just graduated this year, and she was honored the university medal for her thesis, #1 student in almost 400 students, but I bet you she still doesn't think of herself as especially intelligent. My brother. Everyone used to tell him that he was just average because he got average grades, but this kid is so frickin' smart. He's a huge history buff, and one time spent about half an hour explaining to me the importance of some Civil War battle and how it was pivotal in helping the Union win the war. I don't remember the exact details because all I could think about was the level of depth he just got into explaining and analyzing, and also explaining in a way that helped me to understand at the time. My brother's intelligence is the definition of quality, and I'd shout that from the rooftops because as his older sister, I'm so frickin' proud of him. My dad. He's dyslexic, and growing up in the education system in the 70s didn't provide any support, so he's all but illiterate. He left school at 15 with no qualifications. He's always said he's stupid, and that upsets me so much. He won't believe it when we tell him he's not. Me, my mum, and my sister all have education beyond degree level, and he's smarter than any of us. He's eloquent, but sometimes mispronounces new words that he's heard in a different accent. Our accent is heavy on the R sound, so I've noticed him adding it to words that don't have R's. But of course he's never seen it written down to know. He watches historical documentaries and tells us about how they're linked to the ones he's watched a couple of years prior. He once drove me to a university 3 hours away, using the route he'd driven in reverse once without checking a map. I wish he could see himself as intelligent. It seems like a lot of people have things in common with this comment and will enjoy this story. He did actually do a speech for my wedding. I was worried about asking him because I wasn't sure how he'd manage and didn't want to pressure him on anything, but he was keen to do it. My mum made cue cards with picture hints and they did not help him. He just had it written out and learned it off by heart and used cue cards with the full speech to help him. He can read it when he knows what it says, and his speech was by far the most confident and well-performed speech out of all of us. Give him a birthday card with more words than happy birthday and he's very unhappy, but he can smash out a full-on speech with no hesitation. Not for the first time, we have to wonder how many people who are otherwise geniuses have been left behind when they weren't born in the right time or place, or who can't be taught under the education system they have. Glad that your dad's thriving in the right environment. He sounds charismatic as hell. My granddad left school at 12. He's dyslexic, but back in his day, that wasn't a recognized thing. He has a particular way with animals, like he always knows what's wrong. He can fix anything. He's a prolific reader and people just gravitate to him. He's the most helpful person you've ever met and will literally go out of his way to help anyone. My mum's boyfriend. We have a variety of specialists in my family, from medicine to art to education to software. We go around the table at family gatherings and try to stump him with questions. He's never gotten one wrong to date. He just knows everything about everything. Obviously has a photographic memory, reads voraciously, and delivers car parts for a living. I work in manufacturing, so we get a lot of uneducated people. There are a lot of people out there who are smart, but for various reasons weren't properly served by the public schools. They might be barely literate or can hardly string two words together coherently, but they solve problems beautifully, or always have workable ideas, or they talk about ideas rather than people or events. It's hard to quantify, but you know it when you see it. I started out in R&D engineering, but I was responsible for several product lines on top of some new product lines. There was one new product line that was manufactured on a fairly complicated machine that only a few people knew how to troubleshoot and repair, myself being one of them. I was at home one night and got a call that the system went down, so I drove to work, walked in, and it was running. The operator was sitting in the corner just doodling on his notebook. I said, "Hey, I got a call that this wasn't running." "Yep, so it's running now. What changed?" "I don't know." "Uh-huh. Did you fix it?" "Maybe." Over time, I realized that this guy was way more capable than he was letting on. He eventually told me that he plays dumb so they don't overload him with responsibility, since he knows he won't get a pay raise or promotion out of it. I was a bit naive at the time and couldn't really understand why someone would have that perspective. And believe me, I understand now. Anytime I had an R&D run, I started trying to get him on my team. Eventually, I got him transferred to the department I managed and trained him up on technician duties, pushing him for a promotion. I knew a guy who was very smart with the ability to be extremely manipulative and had no idea. He always got good grades in school, often without studying much at all. What was more impressive was his ability to read people's body language, vocal tone fluctuation, and micro-expressions. Often he'd know what emotions someone was feeling and how best to proceed. The guy was a master at subtle communications, such as mirroring and framing conversations so he'd be dominant. He was able to use this social intelligence to get with girls, but he'd also use it to get people to do things he wanted. One of the clearest examples of manipulation that I know of is that he got his friend to break up with his long-term girlfriend. His friend's girlfriend was kind of a drag and would be a little annoying around the group, so he subtly started to slip in emotional and logical suggestions whenever he saw his friend in a moment of emotional vulnerability. Within a week, his friend ended that relationship. Getting away from these specific types of puppet master is the best thing you can do. I've seen people who were just straight up used by him. I grew up with a kid who was one of the smartest people that I ever met. He was in all the excelled classes, a straight-A student. Academics came so easily to this guy. He could have gone to any college he wanted. Well, he just couldn't stay out of trouble, living the thug life, selling substances, and running with wannabe gangsters. It's been 20 or so years since we've been out of high school, and he's done a few stints in prison, still lives with his parents, makes a meager living selling green herb, and it's crazy seeing so much potential lost. The people that strike me are the ones that eliminate the wrong conclusions, somehow, before solving an answer. The wrong conclusions just don't dawn on them. I met a lady that went to an Ivy League school. She could talk to you and hold a nice conversation. She could then turn around and talk to someone else at a higher level. Then, when asked a technical question out of her field of expertise, she could give you a complex answer. She spoke to people on whatever level they were speaking on. I have a friend of the family that took every class at a community college before going on to get his degree. He retained all of that information. Interestingly, he liked to speak in basic terms and hold everyday conversations. If he got shunned at a party, he would initially ignore it and keep hanging out with you. Eventually, as the people who shunned him came to a point where they had to stop their conversation, he'd butt in. They often couldn't figure out the answer to what they were talking about. He would just chime in with a smile and explain the rest of the concept to them. Then he'd turn back to you and keep bullcrapping. I've seen him do that multiple times. My friend in high school thinks that he's dumb, but he has an absolutely phenomenal knowledge of politics and the legal economic system. He has dyslexia, but you wouldn't be able to tell because he reads more seamlessly than most of the rest of us. I wish he would recognize how smart he is, because I think he doesn't aim as high as he could achieve because he doesn't think that he's smart enough. My current girlfriend is actually extremely smart. Her intuition is very good with people. Her problem-solving skills are impressive in situations where she's comfortable, and she has a very deep understanding of the human psyche. But her mother has been gaslighting her since childhood, trying to keep her fully reliant on her. I've held my tongue at points just to try and not be that boyfriend that ruins a relationship, but instead just showing her how smart she really is and where she might have a weak point that I might be able to help with. I've walked her through my thought process and she picks it up very quickly. I always wonder how far she could be at this point in her life had her mother just supported her instead of tearing her down. But just in the short time I've been dating her, I've seen her grow a lot. And I'm very excited to see where she can soar off to. I just hope that she takes me with her. What is the weirdest thing that a customer has requested at Build-A-Bear? A native family wanted to put a real bear tooth inside the bear. It was for a newborn. I made sure to check the sharpness of the tooth so it wouldn't puncture the fabric. Nothing weird with that job though. Although there was this time when this old drunk guy walked by the store and tried to steal a little girl by the entrance. A father intervened and got her back, but people were more bewildered by this guy doing it so obviously rather than getting upset. I hated the store's music though. Kids singing hit songs. Who else remembers the Happy Bear Day song? My god, I hated the chipper face and voice we had to put on, and I hated handling the fluff when refilling it. I worked there for almost 5 years back in the early 2000s. Once there was a woman who came in with her son's monkey and asked for a hole to be stitched up. This was common, and we all knew how to do a basic ladder stitch, so my manager agreed to it. When she took it in the back, she noticed that there were holes only in the crotch of the monkey and that the fur was matted. That's when she realized that this woman's son was probably doing things to that doll. I don't remember if my manager put on gloves and stitched it or offered the woman a new doll, but that was by far the craziest request. I also once had to get into that bear costume after somebody else wore it for 2+ hours because this one lady complained that her son wanted to meet the bear and we'd packed up 10 minutes early. That sucked so bad. I have a few good ones. The weirdest was this mother and daughter. The daughter was probably in her mid-20s, and they specifically came in looking for a little hat. I showed them the hats and they bought a cowboy hat. I tried to make typical conversation at the counter. Usually you ask if it's a gift, but then I asked if it was for a special bear that they already had. The pair looked at each other and then proceeded to explain that the cowboy hat was not for a bear, but for a puppet of a man's, well, private parts. They're a mother and daughter comedy duo who have a Naughty Bits puppet and adult comedy show. This one trouser snake was badly in need of a hat. Watching a teenage girl make a bear dressed like her boyfriend, for her boyfriend while he was there. I've never seen someone try so hard to look interested but failing. Teenage love, I guess. The weirdest thing is all of the middle-aged women who come in every time something new is released. They collect them, but they're always super weird people. Look, as a man who collects and paints tiny figurines, I'm not going to call all collectors weird people, but I will admit that there's on average a greater number of what you would call highly eccentric characters in our ranks. I think every hobby has 4 or 5 normies just kind of hiding from everyone else. Not weird, but heartbreaking. Had an old woman come in and request 5 bears, each with a personalized voice box. She was in the late stages of cancer and was getting a bear for each of her grandkids with a different message for each one to remember her by. Then there was the one that was potentially heartbreaking, ultimately awkward and traumatizing for those involved. A coworker used to work in a different store and one day a person came in, picked a bear and sort of faffed around about a while before taking it to be stuffed. The coworker puts the bear on the machine, hits the pedal and is covered in a cloud of dust along with the guest and the store. Turns out the person had poured their late partner's cremated remains inside the bear and not said anything. Pro tip, if you want to put ashes inside a Build-A-Bear, get a little urn and put some ashes into that, and put that in the bear. Loose ash is bad. Back in the earlier Build-A-Bear days, I was asked to put an urn that contained the ashes of their father who had recently passed from cancer into the bear. I didn't know what to say and my manager was on a break. They were really sweet and I completed the task for them. Read Teddy, if I recall correctly. They'd also previously recorded his voice that also went into the Teddy. 20 minutes later, when my manager returned, I informed her of what happened and how I handled it, and within the next few months we had a store policy of no deceased remains. Looking back on it, I'm happy that I could do that for them. They even dressed it like him and had planned to have it on the mantle for the family and grandchildren to press the hand and hear him. I worked at Build-A-Bear for 8 years. It was honestly a pretty great job. The weirdest request I ever had was a woman bringing in a moose, not our brand. It was a gift from her boyfriend and her child had ripped the head clean off. She wanted to know if we could fix it. I was one of the better ones at the sewing, so the manager brought it to me. I told the woman I'd do my best. I was able to get the head back on, returned it to the woman, and she said it looked as good as new. One day we had a kindergarten teacher drag in this huge Eeyore stuffed animal that the kids loved. It had gone flat over the years and smelled and looked just as gross. We actually opened it and refilled it. The smell as the air and stuffing went into it was awful. Sewed it back up and sent her on her way. We had multiple people come in to put pacifiers in the bear to break their little ones off the habit. One particular mum did that, and then came back 3 days later and had us open it up and remove it. The saddest was the woman who put a mini urn of her parents' ashes inside. Those are the ones that stick out to me anyway. I never had any weird guest experiences, just weird experiences with the management. I was ultimately fired because I refused to stand outside the store and dance. We were on the lower level of a mall, and the manager told me to try and make eye contact with children on the second level, and in so many words, get them to throw a tantrum so the parent would bring them in. I'd been a good employee, and the job was otherwise very fun, but I was glad to go. That manager lived and breathed that job and made the whole store very uncomfortable. I wasn't an employee, but I was there for this story. I was getting a Build-A-Bear done for my friend for their birthday. I was going to make it full of inside jokes and a few light inappropriate jokes. In front of me was a guy with a bear that looked like he actually put some thought into it. I was standing behind him when he did his recording. He was nice and cool, and then he grabbed the mic. I thought he was going to say something nice because he told the guy working there that it was for his girlfriend. And here's how this guy started his recording. "Hey there, you fat B-word. I know you're effing Roberto, you fricking harlot. You fricking cow!" And keep in mind, he's screaming this in a store full of young children. That employee didn't stop him because I assume he was too scared that the guy would probably rip out his throat if he intervened. Parents were scrambling over to cover their kids' ears. The guy did this for I think a minute, but it felt like an eternity. After getting his voice box sewn into the bear, he practically skipped out of the store happy as a clam. I know why he did it. I'm sure he planned a nice date with her and then he'd give her the bear and crush her world. But this guy was yelling at the top of his lungs. When I made a dirty joke, I was at least quiet so that the kids behind me didn't hear. Everybody wanted to kill him, but they were also too scared to stop him. Not really weird, but everyone was speechless in that Build-A-Bear. One of the few regrets in life is that I wasn't eating at that fancy Italian bistro on 4th, the one where they've got real candles on the tables, not the electric fake ones, and the live musician Federetti who softly pours at his accordion and sings slowly between sips of wine while you chew at your tortellini, savoring the rich homespun flavors and rigid meets soft textures and the sheer aesthetic warmth of the place. And to your right, a well-dressed couple clinking their glasses and smiling, and he hands her a card and a box of chocolates and a bear, and she awes and laughs and kisses him and squeezes the bear and, "Hey there, you fat B-word. I know you're effing Roberto, you fricking harlot. You fricking cow." I was interviewed. It was a group interview and they asked us all questions. Towards the end, they asked us individually if we wanted to sing a song, but stressed we didn't have to. Only employees who sang moved on in the interview process. And yes, I agree I should have gone with "Let the Bodies Hit the Floor." My girlfriend and her grad school friends made a bear called Catastrophe Bear, and he said, "Everything is awful." The employees at the Build-A-Bear in the mall near me told me that a lady would come in with her pet monkey that she treated as her child. She used it as a clothing store for the monkey. She also tried to sue the local school district into letting the monkey attend, but was unsuccessful. I worked there in high school about 10 years ago now. I guess the weirdest thing, but was very common, was putting dead relatives' recorded voices into stuffed animals. One was for a little girl whose father had died in Iraq. I was definitely crying while I sewed that one up. Other than that, there were a few bronies that came in for Rainbow Dash. They were always very awkward, but nice. I remember being asked to repair a Smurfette because she was getting, quote, a little loose. Okay, first of all, Papa Smurf didn't create Smurfette, Gargamel did. She was sent in as Gargamel's evil spy with the intention of destroying the Smurf village, but the overwhelming goodness of the Smurf way of life transformed her. And as for the whole promiscuity scenario, well, that just couldn't happen. Smurfs are asexual. They don't even have reproductive organs under those little white pants. That's what's so illogical, about being a Smurf. What's the point of living if you don't have a little blue member? Damn it, Donnie. But also, yes, I have gone a little off the rails, including that commenter's rant. Why? Because I coincidentally recently read the Smurf comic, where Smurfette arrives, and let me tell you, viewers, it is one of the most wildly misogynistic things I have ever seen. I mean, my God, it has to be seen to be believed. A woman had come into the store, I was the only person on as the opening manager, and Charmander had just come out that morning. I was understandably busy and was helping a large, needy family when I noticed a woman come in. I went up to greet her and let her know I was almost done and she'd have my undivided attention soon. This woman was in rough shape. She looked like she was fresh out of the hospital, battered, bruised, cut up, and stitched back together. She seemed distracted and upset, so I assured I'd be no more than a couple of minutes and to look at the options. I finally finished with the others and started talking to her. It turned out her and her husband and child were hit by a drunk driver coming home from a movie that weekend, and her husband hadn't made it. We were both a weepy mess, and all she wanted was a bear with a saved Snapchat video of him singing a silly little song he made up for her. We charged her shattered phone a bit from my power bank and got the sound in. Going through the heart ceremony, it felt like I was performing a memorial service for her. We wrapped the heart with a bit of his favorite t-shirt and sewed it up. The bear was dressed in a Chicago Bears gear, and we made a birth certificate. After checkout, she asked if she could come back in to add his ashes, and I had to tell her I could get in a lot of trouble, but showed her a video of our stitching method and gave her a length of needle and thread to attempt on her own. She gave me a long, teary hug, but left so much happier. I know it might not be the weirdest story, but I'll never forget her. That kind of day makes me love working at Build-A-Bear. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I've been censored in my bear's name twice at Build-A-Bear. Once it happened when I was 5, and once when I was 6. When I was 5, I got a bear who I wanted to name Honey Punch. Shut up, I was 5. The attendant told me no, punch is a bad word, so she forced me to change it to Bunch. The same thing happened with the second bear next year, albeit different first half of the name. I worked for them for a good 2 years a couple of years back. I've put sealed ashes of pets inside, voices of dead relatives, my favorite being a girl who wanted her grand's voice in, and we did it using a recording from her phone. Hello, Shirley, just ringing to see how you are. Love you, you little C-word. And sewed in pieces of comfort blankets and other childhood keepsakes. There was this independent store in a mall that did the same thing. A woman brought her young daughter in to celebrate the little girl's first communication with a spirit, saying, "She's become a seer, like me." I worked at Build-A-Bear for 7 years, and I don't know that any requests were super weird. We put recordings of deceased relatives, recordings of fetal heartbeats, pacifiers, and squeakers from dog toys in animals. Okay, that last one does sound a bit strange, but the rest were usually very sweet and touching moments, and sometimes they were exciting for the kiddo who was graduating from their pacifier. I did get called a lot of names when the holidays rolled around and we were out of the holiday animals. That's no longer an issue since Maxine retired and everything was produced in ridiculous quantities instead of limited ones. I was often asked to produce products we didn't have in stock, but that's retail. I think the weirdest experiences were helping kids dress their animals. Some folks have interesting choices in outfits. I remember one little bear left our store in a tank top, undies, and heels, with bows over the ears, of course. The owner of said bear was a 6-year-old girl, but she stayed within her budget. I actually loved irking and working there, and if I had any free time or ever needed any extra money, I'd probably go back. My mum and I are both adults, and we both like stuffed animals. My mum wanted a lion from Build-A-Bear a long time ago, and the employee wouldn't let her finish making her look until she made a wish on the heart. The strangest request that employee probably ever got was, "Stop telling me to make a wish." For those who are wondering, the woman wouldn't let her continue without doing the heart ceremony, and my mother told her she reserved the right to make a wish later. So we were no longer being held captive by a woman with an unsewn lion. Frankly, if it were me, I would have complained to corporate that being condescending to adults lost them future business. It's actually a shame because they do many animals where part of the proceeds go to the WWF, including my mum's lion and a wolf I got later from the person I was dating at the time. Sometimes you just want to get a stuffed animal and support the wild, you know? Oh god, I worked there a lifetime ago, around 2000 or so. I loved that job. One of the weirdest things was when a customer bought a pet's ashes in a little plastic baggie. I was no longer surprised by the ashes thing, but I was really surprised when they asked me to sew the bag of ashes to the outside of the stuffed cat. I really can't remember if this is 100% true, but I think I passed off that customer to my manager because I can't sew that well. There was another one. My store was in this fairly large mall in suburban New York, and it was a fairly popular stop to some touring events. I remember when Jim Belushi and Dan Aykroyd stopped by to promote their Sacred Hearts blues band, and my store manager authorized us to make a teddy bear and dress it like a blues brother. But only one teddy bear. To share between them, I guess. I was celebrity starstruck when I presented it to them, but looking back on the old Polaroid I have of the moment, the weary, confused looks from both of them will always stick out in my mind. I worked at Build-A-Bear for a few months when I was at uni, and it was great. I didn't find anything super weird as I worked in a new store and wasn't there very long, but I just found the amount of money people would fork out for the latest bear absolutely insane. We had a kid who was a huge brat, pulling things off shelves, crying and shouting when his parents said no. His bear ends up about 70 pounds. Then the next day, the mum comes back in saying how her son wants some different boots and skates for his chase bear now, and doesn't like the ones they bought. She didn't bring any of the tags in or a different receipt though, so I just handed her off to the manager because I didn't want to deal with that. My favorite ones were a couple and their toddler. The mum was pregnant and they were making a bear for their baby-to-be. Their son was so excited that he got to kiss the heart that went into his future sibling's bear, and it was so adorable. Overall, a great place to work and would recommend it if you don't hate kids. Not an employee, but a few years ago I went with my little sister to get some horse thing done, and we were waiting in line to do the heart thing where you have to kiss it and promise to love the thing forever. The girl in front of us asked the lady doing the hearts if her bear was gay because it was rainbow. The employee looked a bit taken aback but recovered and told her the bear could be gay if she wanted. And in the most lethal voice I've ever heard out of a small child, she says, "If you give him a gay heart, I'll rip it out myself and feed it to the wolves." That haunts me to this day. I mean, I hope that that employee gave the bear the gayest heart that they'd ever given any animal in the world, and that the bear came alive and taught the little child and her family some gosh damn tolerance. Also, why did you pick the rainbow bear if you're going to be a jerk about it, kid? I had parents come in and ask me to put their young daughter's pacifiers into the bear. They insisted she had agreed as a way to stop using them. The little girl looked horrified the entire time we stuffed them in the bear. She definitely wasn't ready to let them go. I was working at Build-A-Bear when I was in college. This was at the same time the My Little Pony collection came out. We had a couple of all brony and furry birthday parties booked, but from what I heard, everyone was pretty nice. Although we did have to do the furry one after work hours, since our managers were afraid people in large animal costumes would tee off parents and freak out the kids. The weirdest one by far, though, was when one of the bronies asked if he could put a .22 round in his Twilight Sparkle. I told him sure, but this is definitely dangerous if it gets too warm. He said he understood, but being a princess is a very dangerous job, and he wanted her to be safe. They asked me to make a hole between the legs so they can stick a marital aid in there. I interviewed for them last year. My hair was a very light blonde, but I had dark roots, so it was easy to tell them it wasn't my natural color. Although it was a very natural color, my interview asked me if I could dye it black because it was unnatural and my parents would throw a fit. I told them it wouldn't be possible because it took me months to get that blonde. She then proceeded to write the number 1 on a piece of paper. "This is what I've graded your interview on a scale of 1 to 5. I didn't say anything and just walked out. All because I didn't want to dye my hair black. Oh, and the hours? 10 hours a week while I went to school. Back when I worked a few years ago, I had a customer come in holding a bag of what looked like at least 10 pacifiers. She spread the pacifiers through the inside of the bear and told her son that they were a big boy now and didn't need the pacifiers anymore, but he'll always be close to them as they're in the bear now. So I guess it wasn't so weird as it was sweet, right? My girlfriend and I were probably the weirdest group of the day at our local Build-A-Bear. We went to Build-A-Bear for her birthday and the promotional live-action Lion King bears were on sale, so we decided to get the ugly live-action Pumbaa bear. For those of you who haven't seen him before, he is an absolute unit with lazy eyes and an evil smile. He knows the sins he's committed and he is not remorseful. Anyway, we dressed him in nothing but a cowboy hat and Marvel boxers, then named him Charles Entertainment Cheese. Oh, and his voice box is also the Super Mario theme. I like to imagine that when I die, the only thing that will be there is just his face in an endless void, while the Super Mario theme plays ominously in the background for eternity. The employees were super helpful, but obviously a little uncomfortable at how hard we were laughing at the creation of our stupid son. I forget to mention that we also went to Claire's and got him a single stud earring because he was a good boy and ate all of his vegetables. One day at Build-A-Bear, my boyfriend found a voice box that someone else had already recorded that just said, "Bush did September 11th. Years later, Harold the bear is still with us, the voice of an unknown prophet still ringing out. Someone once just wanted 3 empty skin bags. Didn't name them, no stuffing, paid and left and never came back again. I was the weird customer. Years ago, I made a monkey one for my cousin that I put a noisemaker in the crotch that would laugh when you squeezed it. Got some really weird looks from the employee helping me put it together. My grandma was definitely not amused when my cousin opened it in front of the whole family. Do you enter other people's homes as a part of your job? What's the craziest thing you saw? I was on a ride along with a fire department. We responded to smell of smoke in an apartment building. We found the apartment fast enough because the fire alarm was going off inside. We walked in to find this guy as exposed as the day he was born, passed out on the floor in front of the TV with adult movies on way louder than they should be and the remnants of a pizza in the oven. The gentleman in question was very drunk. There were beer cans all over the kitchen and a bottle of liquor on the floor next to him. To wake him up, we actually all left, and the fire chief woke him up in his daily uniform so he didn't think he was being abducted. Lastly, this was in Fargo, North Dakota, about 14 years ago. So this isn't so much weird, but it was the most shocking. I was working with adults with intellectual disabilities that lived in residential homes. It was one of my first weeks on the job, and a coworker was taking me out to a home to show me what she did when she did home reviews. We got to the house, opened the doors, and we were instantly hit with a wall of air smelling like poop. 2 steps in, and it was apparent there was diarrhea on a chair, on the carpets, and random splotches all over. The whole house was in shambles. The fridge was full of moldy food, and I'll never forget picking up the shredded cheese, shaking the bag, and seeing green mold flakes go up and down. Food was spattered all over the cabinets, the beds were stained with pee and poop, and expired canned food was everywhere. The staff there had been neglecting those guys for a long time, and nobody had bothered to check up on them. Service plumber here. At the house of an elderly lady, at least 75 years old, there were undressed pictures of her on the walls and several marital aids all about. It was interesting. My parents have a friend who commissioned a portrait of herself undressed from the waist up. She and her husband hung this giant professional portrait front and center in their living room and have since their children were young. They are interesting people. I do construction sales, so I'm in homes a lot. For me, it's the sheer number of preppers that exist. Walk into a suburban America basement and bam, 24 buckets full of survival food or ammo stuffed into every alcove and rafter. It's definitely not just the ones you expect. I do insulation and I've sprayed some impressive prepper spaces. My favorite was a 1,200 square foot house with a 2,000 square foot basement, concrete ceilings and walls. Part of the area was under his porch. It was a dang bunker. The guy even installed hydraulics on the vault door. In case the house falls on it, I can still open the door. This is really interesting. A couple of bills from The Last of Us in the making. Wild that so many people have the end of civilization as we know it on their minds to such a degree. Can't imagine having the time for that. I used to work for a concrete company, and our mixer trucks would sometimes damage property. Typically, my partner and I did maintenance on the plants, but we'd get sent to job sites to unscrew whatever the drivers did. So while at one house, we had to tear up a driveway, replace the culvert, and re-pour the end of the driveway. The first day we were there, all of the old snoopy neighbors were standing around watching, and I had to pee pretty bad. So I asked the homeowner if I could use the bathroom. He said, sure, and led me through his house, past the bathroom, into the bathroom in the master bedroom. Already creeped out by that. Oh, and also I noticed cameras all over the place. Some pointed out of windows, some pointed into the rooms. Creep factor leveled up. He leads me into the bathroom, opens the door, and holds it for me like you would at a store when someone's behind you. I say thanks, and he just stays standing there. I had to walk past him and yank the door closed. While leaving, I notice a bedroom decked out in kids' stuff. This would not normally toss up any flags. Grandkids' room, probably, right? But with all the added creepiness, it just didn't seem normal at all. I told my partner. He laughed and pointed out there was probably cameras in the bathroom. If either of us had to pee after that, we drove down to the gas station. So this was around 15 years ago. We're talking camcorders on tripods, not your cutesy nanny cams. The old guy was single, and this wasn't a very kid-friendly setup as far as foster homes go. Back in the early 90s, I worked for a company that removed old electric water heaters and replaced them with propane-powered ones. Because propane water heaters can possibly spew carbon monoxide, there are state regulations as to where the heaters can and can't be placed. So it was my job to inspect the water heater room and draw up plans for ventilation, if necessary. I showed up at a client's home to inspect the area where he had his water heater to see if we needed to install any vents. When I asked to see his current water heater, he seemed a little uncomfortable and said, "I have something in the room that I forgot to clean up." I followed him to the room, and when he opened the door, the smell of green herb hit me. In this room, he had fishing lines strung up with trimmed plants being dried. If I were to guess, there must have been a couple of pounds of ganja drying up there. He said, "Oh, sorry about that," and I smiled and told him, "No problem, I don't even know what that is." I knew exactly what it was, but I didn't want the guy to get worried about me telling someone else. He offered me some, but I told him, "No thanks, don't know what it is." As I was leaving, he asked me, "You aren't going to tell anyone about the plants, are you?" I asked, "What plants?" The guy smiled and then said, "You sure you don't want some?" I definitely wanted some, but I was still pretty new at the job, so I didn't want to take the chance that accepting Mary J from him would blow up in my face. Before I left, I told him, "Make sure you clear that closet before our guys arrived. They might not be happy about the plants that I didn't see." As a maintenance guy at a large apartment complex, I've seen some stuff. Undressed people, really gross people, but thank God, no dead people. I remember doing an emergency water repair, and I had to go into an occupied unit. It was the strangest thing. It was pretty much empty, dirty, but empty. Like nobody lived there. No furniture, not even a bed, just a crappy mattress on the floor. And some clothes scattered around. At least 30 pairs of Nike shoes, all sorts of weird colors. Like this guy had no TV or couch, but had a collection of expensive shoes. All the same size from what I could tell. I don't know, it wasn't as bad as a few of the hoarder units we had. Worked as a furniture delivery guy for a rent-to-own place in Iowa for a couple of years. I saw some absolutely crazy stuff. We were delivering a couch to someone, and when we arrived, there was no answer to our knocking. We called our manager back at the store and explained that nobody was home. He tells us to hang out for a minute while he tries getting in touch with the customer. While we're waiting, we start hearing this weird sort of screeching sound coming from a detached garage. We decide to investigate the house. We turn the corner to the front of the garage and come face to face with the meanest, scariest-looking monkey I've ever seen. It was in the garage, but they had like this wire fence keeping it inside, and the entire garage was its cage, in the middle of BFE, Iowa. I have no idea what kind of monkey it was. It was very large and very angry. Checking fire alarms and testing emergency bedside buttons in a nursing home that are like individual little apartments. Opened the door to the stench of death, and sure enough, lady dead and on the bed and had been there for about 2 days. Yes, the bedside button worked fine. No, nobody was in trouble for her not being found for 2 days. This specific place is very independent. They have their own cars and are free to come and go as they please, and the only time someone comes by is for some sort of maintenance or if they have visitors stop by. This lady had 7 huge birds, parrots and stuff, all without cages and crapping directly onto the floor. It only had the pad that goes under the carpet, and everything had seeped through. It was horrible. She just got a German Shepherd puppy as well, and then proceeded to show me her machete collection. Had a dope classic Airstream in the backyard, though. My coworker called animal control on her, but we ended up closing her case shortly after, so not sure whatever happened. I can smell and hear the noise from a 7-parrot household, and it is giving me a headache and making me nauseous. Also, I just had to Google what a classic Airstream is, and assuming I found the right thing, that is one cool campervan trailer. Maybe that's why she was letting animals destroy her house. I worked as a delivery driver for a Deliver Anything company in the early 2000s. At the time, it was a very novel but ultimately unsustainable idea for a business. We had a lot of regular weirdos. One night, one of those weirdos ordered about $30 worth of candles from the dollar store. This job really brought to the forefront the disconnects that exist in us as consumers. So of course, initially, I'd gotten the wrong kind of candles for the weirdo. He showed me what he wanted at his apartment door. Luckily, the store was literally a couple of blocks away, so I didn't have to waste much time because I wasn't being paid hourly. "Come in," is what I was greeted with when I returned, which is never something I'm particularly happy about as a delivery person. I see what my rational brain tells me as a pile of laundry on a coffee table in front of a filthy couch. But it's not that, it's a 3-foot-tall wax pile. I'd bought candles in jars the first time, and I could definitely see why those wouldn't work for our gentleman. He needed freestanding candles so he could just plop one down and light it to continue building his wax mountain, which was starting to spill onto the floor. A less weird but more awkward experience I had with this man was him literally falling asleep mid-signature for his Burger King. A plane. This guy was refurbishing a light aircraft in his lounge. It was only the fuselage, the wings were outside. That certainly was the weirdest. I mean, that's actually rad, but weird that he did it in his lounge instead of outside under a tent or in a garage or something. On one occasion, we were demolishing a kitchen for a remodel and we found, sealed inside the wall, 5 empty beers and 1 full one. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I used to install smoke alarms for the hearing impaired, 50% elderly and 50% deaf, all over the state of Oklahoma. I'd get addresses for the installations the week before and plan routes accordingly, meaning I'd just put the addresses into Google and check everything out on Earth and map views. This place I'm thinking of was in the middle of nowhere, which is saying something considering the entire state of Oklahoma is in the middle of nowhere. When my ASL interpreter and I made the trip, we had to ramp our minivan over the nearly washed-out bridge, bounce down a forest road, and choose which of 3 broken trailers these people were using as a shelter. Looking back, we really should have just called it before ramping the bridge. Once there, we met the people and they explained, in ASL through my interpreter, that they'd had a tornado rip through their home that ended up sparking a fire somehow, and that explanation never made it through translation. Since then, they'd decided to be more fire safety conscious, which I applaud, but their home had holes in the roof the size of people. One wall was just a tapestry of duct-taped trash bags. I didn't feel right just installing fancy smoke alarms when they clearly needed much more help, but there wasn't anything I could do, really. So I'm doing the only thing I can do, installing the smoke alarms and explaining basic fire safety, teaching them to use their bed-shaking devices. These people were deaf. When I started to explain that they should exit the home without stopping to grab anything valuable, including pets, and they stopped me and explained that their pet is very valuable, as in it had monetary value. I'm not one to pry, so I took this at face value and reiterated the importance of leaving the home immediately if it's on fire, especially because it's a trailer home. They had a long, silent conversation with my interpreter, during which she looked more and more concerned. The occupants go into a room that I hadn't entered yet and emerged with a frickin' bald eagle on a leash. That's illegal, guys. I had a neighbor who offered me money to clean her apartment. She had mental health issues and got some kind of subsidy from the county for home assistance, which she didn't like, but she had an inspection coming up for continuing her other benefits, so I walked in and there were dishes everywhere, glasses with dried stuff in the bottom, pizza boxes that smelled of old cheese and stacks, ashtrays piled so high they were pyramids of butts, beer cans and bottles scattered. Went into the kitchen and both sinks were piled up past the faucet. One side had water in it that was covered in a white film. The kitchen trash had overflowed to the floor and had flies buzzing around it. Gross, but I needed the money, so I rolled up my sleeves and got to work. After I got the dishes under control, I moved on to the stove and oven. When I opened the door, the entire bottom of the oven was crawling with maggots. The wave of smell was enough to knock me on my butt, and I ran out gagging. I went home, got a mask on, went back, and finished cleaning up. I still can't figure out what she did to that oven. There was no food inside, and it looked like it had never been used. Not exactly weird, but cool. Knocked on the door and didn't get a response. The door was unlocked, so I let myself in to find a 90-year-old woman in her dressing gown headbanging to Led Zeppelin. I was an estate agent, a realtor for rental properties, and I had a few wild moments. The top 2 were when I'd been okayed by a member of a male couple to let myself in for a flat viewing one Saturday morning, but he must have forgotten to tell his partner, because when I opened the door to the bedroom with my heterosexual middle-aged potential buyers, we found one of the tenants having a vigorous affair against the wall without a stitch on them and only 5 feet away. Still no idea how we didn't hear them before we opened the door. The other one was similar, but I was there to take photos, and the tenant, an elderly, overweight woman, forgot I was coming, so guess who I found in the bath? I'm trying to think if I really were set on buying a place, would I be completely put off by the visual of someone desecrating their marital vows against the wall? You know what? I can't put my finger on why, but I think I wouldn't be able to see the place the same way afterwards. I I used to be a house painter. One weekend I was working with my female coworker at a house for a woman and her toddler daughter. The daughter was chatty and cute, mostly sat on the couch watching TV, but would talk to us while we worked. I was on my knees painting some trim with my back to the daughter when she said, "Look at me!" I turned around and saw her on the couch wrapped in a blanket. She opened the blanket and said, "I'm not wearing any clothes." I immediately turned back around and said loudly, "I don't need to see that." From the other room, her mum yelled out, "Is she taking her clothes off again?" At the end of the day, we were laughing about it with the mother, and I said, "She's going to be really popular when she gets older." Luckily, the mother took that joke well. I worked for Pizza Hut many years ago. I had to deliver to a house that was as normal as can be on the outside. I knocked on the door, and a guy was wearing only silk boxers when he answered. He was slightly overweight, but looked like he was smuggling a frickin' baseball bat in his boxers. He was casual as heck and asked me to step inside for a second as he had to go get his wallet. I took one step inside and this extremely hot lady came around the corner. She was obviously not wearing a bra and her robe was barely closed. One of her steps forward flapped open her robe enough to know that she'd shaved her down below area. I looked behind her and you could see a video camera set up on a tripod, so it was obvious what they were doing. The guy handed me the money with a good-sized tip, no pun intended, and tells me that he appreciated me bringing their food. I said, "No problem. Have fun doing what you're doing, and if you need a cameraman, let me know." I don't even remember thinking the last part until it was coming out of my mouth. He just kinda laughed and said, "Maybe next time, my dude." The girl just laughed and I left. Damn the bad luck. Honestly, I don't know what I would have done if they said, "Yeah, let's do this." I was in the bathroom. I thought I saw a giant pink marital aid. A closer look revealed that it was soap shaped like a man's junk. Years ago, I used to deliver and set up furniture of all sorts. Not that weird, but I used to find vibrating toys and marital aids under mattresses all the fricking time. I'd stand the mattress up against the wall and they'd be laid out there. I'd simply tell the homeowner, "I've got to grab some tools from the truck. If there's anything you need to clean up, now is the time to do it." I'd come back in and the adult toys would be gone. Every time, and they'd never say a word about it. It wasn't a big deal, I just didn't want to handle them if the homeowner was home. They'd be a little embarrassed. Like no eye contact or red cheeks, but I'd like to think I handled it as professionally as possible, given the fact that I was 17 to 20 years old. Similar, I was tasked with entering every room in a small hotel to verify dimensions for an architectural project. One room, two men who looked like they were from the 80s, clearly doing some sort of business. Computers, printers, filing cabinets. But there was also some serious adult flicks on the TV, like hardcore stuff, and it was just background noise. So weird. When I did pest control, I had a house I serviced where 3 women who took their clothes off for money lived. They had poles all over the place and so much glitter everywhere. But they always hooked me up with some really good coffee that one of them got sent back from home. Aside from that, I found a body once. That probably wins it for stuff I wasn't expecting. Wasn't inside their home, but outside. I was on hurricane relief in the mountains of New York. We had to go and supply water to this guy whose house was deep in the woods. His property was surrounded by trees, and hanging from those trees were a bunch of colored baby dolls from nooses. There was a wooden archway as you approached his house that said "Arbeit macht frei," which means "work sets you free." That slogan was the same one used in the most famous of the infamous and evil camps of the Third Reich. I had to work in a government housing block at Main and Hastings in Vancouver. I was cutting a hole in a ceiling while someone was laying a dirty mattress right beside the ladder, injecting smack. The person was so screwed up that he didn't even notice all of the drywall dust I was spilling on him. Male anatomy. Eggplants everywhere. Sculptures and artworks of sausages, literally about 1,000, like a hoarder-type situation. I was doing their cable, and you really couldn't avoid contact with a trouser monster or two. It was dark in there from the skyscraper-sized stacks of male members blocking out the light. Years ago, I drove a tow truck at night, putting myself through college. Got a call to go and see this woman's car. I pull up, and she's in the car and won't get out. I ask her, "Mom, please get out so I can safely tow your vehicle without you in it." She said, "That's never going to happen." I said, "It's an insurance violation for me to let you ride in your car." It was late, so I said, "Screw it. Mom, please move to the passenger seat so I can put your car in neutral and steer it up onto the flatbed." She complies. I get in the car and she says, "I can't leave them alone in here." And I'm like, "Who?" I turn around and there's, no joke, 30 cats in the back seat of this old station wagon. Every single one of them in some sort of Halloween costume. The car smelled worse than anything I've ever encountered in my entire life. I guess this counts as a home since the crazy cat lady was living in her car. Oh dear. Well, colour me surprised that there wasn't just the most wild ongoing feline melee 24/7 in that place. And I know you said you weren't joking, but more than 30? In a car? What on earth? I do property maintenance. One guy has been having problems with his heater recently. The breakers are in the closet on the wall. I've gone in a few times and noticed this huge stack covered by a big blue blanket. The other day I got curious and I took a peek in. It was a huge collection of adult magazines. It wasn't just one stack either. There were 2 stacks. I'm basically 6 foot tall, and these came up to my chin. I've seen all kinds of crappy and nasty apartments, but this one had me chuckling all day. I do property management for multimillionaires, one of whom has a plaque in her house from when she sold her shares in a company in excess of 50 million. It's not as strange as some of the comments here, but it always creeped me out. And her house is extremely nice, right on the beach, but it's a pretty old house. Inside, everything is pretty old, from the furniture to the wallpaper. She has an abundance of creepy pictures dating back to the 1800s on her walls, on her tables, and even her cup holders have creepy-looking people on the bottom, where you'd put your cup. I imagine it's all old pictures of her family, but it's really bizarre. She also has really old dolls that look creepy as hell, some of them resembling Annabelle from the movie. She probably has 3 or 4 of those in every room in her 5,000+ square foot house. I hate going there. What did that weird kid in your school end up doing that you'll never forget? He had a book where he'd write in people that had wronged him. I got put in for smelling like soap. She Naruto ran everywhere and told everyone her dad was Harry Potter at age 12, and most memorably came to school bawling her eyes out because she said she had laid an egg and her parents had eaten it for breakfast. She hissed at people in the hallways and then bit somebody. Said girl went to my middle school in Chandler, Arizona. It seems like every school has a hisser, but she didn't think she was a snake, she was a cat girl. School bell rings, playground doors open, and the weird kid walks directly to the center and just screams for a full minute. I thought it was weird then, but now I can relate. Ate a sheep eye that we were supposed to be dissecting in science class. Man, oh man. Aren't those things full of inedible, probably toxic preservatives? Aye, but he lived to tell the tale. Ended up in a mental institution because his parents bought him a new mattress, and while removing the old one, they found multiple mason jars full of blood. No exaggeration, it was like 2 gallons. There was a police investigation, and it turns out it was all his blood, and his only answer as to why was, just in case. This girl just decided she wanted to be pregnant. She proceeded to ask probably half the people in our high school if they'd impregnate her, and then when that didn't work, she bought a Ziploc bag and asked for guys to splooge in it. Everyone called her the Splooge Bank after that, and I honestly can't even remember her real name. Yeah, there were a few girls in my school who were really determined to get preggo. Several of them actually did. They'd be homeschooled once they started showing, but one girl kept coming to school right up to her due date. She was so proud of herself. She kept telling people to put their hands on her belly and feel the baby moving around. She refused to name a dad. Most of us figured it was the football team. Ate styrofoam and then visibly lied about it and denied when someone pointed it out. Bits of styrofoam came out of his mouth. Oh boy. What do you do about this? I mean, other than calling the medical services, I mean in the long term, because they clearly knew it was bad to eat, otherwise they probably wouldn't have lied about it. Hopefully they lived and the resulting stomachache educated them against any future culinary endeavors like this. I had someone similar eat glue sticks in my first high school. In high school, I was talking to this girl and she'd been eating this cheese bread. When she finished it, she proceeded to just eat the napkin the cheese bread had been wrapped in. Why? Because it tasted like cheese bread. I was freaked out and I walked away. Went to a large school, like 3,000 students. If anybody said anything to the weird kid that he didn't like, he'd stare at you and then just recite your name and address. It was a little creepy. Also, a little impressive, honestly. A girl once took out her glass eye and threw it at our French teacher. "Rebecca, eyes on me when I'm teaching the lesson," is what I hoped the teacher said before that happened. Robbed a gas station dressed as a ninja armed with a katana. Stole cash from the register, all the cigarettes he could carry, and a bunch of lottery tickets. He then fled across state lines, With a 17-year-old girl, he was 19. Wasn't a great result for him. Never knew whether I was supposed to be impressed, disgusted, or have an existential crisis. 7th grade. The guy didn't have a pen or pencil for the test, and the teacher wouldn't give him one. You need to be more prepared, etc., etc. So the guy took out a paperclip, straightened it out, shanked himself, and then started doing the test using his blood as ink. He was quickly sent to the nurse's office. It was kind of a sad situation. The teacher shouldn't have done that, and I think the student was picked on a lot and wasn't very stable in the first place. There was this really mentally messed up kid I could probably write a book about. He went through a phase where he was obsessed with JFK. He printed out pictures of him and taped them to everything, his binder, truck, locker, everything. I don't know what happened to him, but later that year, all of those pictures changed to pictures of the leader of the Third Reich. He referred to this as the time that the devil overtook him with evil. He did the same crap with William Shatner and a teacher at our school, but the bizarre satanic Führer observation takes the cake. He was also banned from the computers because the library lady caught him spanking the hog to some naughty movies in there. At an all-school assembly during my freshman year, a motivational speaker posed an easy rhetorical question to the crowd, and the weird kid in my grade unnecessarily shouted out the answer to every bored person's sudden delight. For some reason, I guess trying to maintain his authority, the speaker asked our weird kid, "What's your name, son?" And without pause, a weird kid stood up from his chair and loudly proclaimed, "My name is Booger." This announcement was met with raucous applause and laughter from the entire student body. It was gloriously random and weird. From then on, the weird kid was known only as Booger in our small town. I'll admit that it did fit him better than Sean, and he frickin' owned that name until graduation. There was this huge guy, we're talking tall and wide, in our classes. To support his impressive body, he ate a lot. He'd bring an entire roll of cookies, we're talking like 20, and stack them on one side of his desk. Then he would take a bite out of cookie number 1 and put it on the other side of his desk. Then he'd take one bite out of the next cookie and place that one on top of cookie number 1. He'd go through the whole stack until all the cookies were partially eaten and in a neat stack on the other side of his desk. Then he'd do it again, take one bite off the top cookie and place that in the original side of the desk, bite the next cookie, etc., etc. After maybe 15 minutes of biting and snacking, the whole stack would be gone. Now, we weren't even supposed to eat in class, but he always got away with it somehow. Our weird kid and his girlfriend made a list of people in the school they wanted to commit a number of heinous crimes against. That got investigated real quick, but I don't know what the actual punishment was that they got. They dressed like the Queen of England, with the hair and shoes and everything, from elementary to middle school. Then they dressed like a doll for a year and tried to hook up with everyone, got kicked off stage at a talent show for doing a burlesque routine, and then would work her bedroom prowess into every oral report she had to do. And her last year she came to school 2 times in just a miniskirt and bra. I didn't know her personally at all, but I've kind of suspected she might have had some really messed up stuff going on at home. So there was this guy at our school when I was a freshman that everybody called Wolfman, who was weird in all the wrong ways. He claimed to have superpowers, teleportation, Dragon Ball Z like energy creation and whatnot. All the girls said he'd just stare at them if they had class with him. He hung around us freshmen and did his best to flirt with the girls. For an example of his flirting, he once told a girl that while astral projecting, he saw her face on Jupiter. Needless to say, the girls stayed away from him. He graduated though, and his brother started at the school. Now, Wolfman wasn't a tall guy by any stretch of the imagination, maybe 5 feet at most, but his brother was a good foot shorter than him. He looked like he belonged in 3rd grade, and he never got any taller. It didn't help that he always wore a child's Goosebumps jacket, and that made people start calling him Goosebumps. He was even more convinced of his powers than his brother, but at least he was less overtly creepy. But that's all he really had going for him. One memorable day, I was in math class and he started shaking violently. People ignored him, so he started flapping his arms around. Wondering if this was an actual seizure, the girl next to him put her hand on him and asked if he was okay, and he growled back, "Oh, take your hand off me. This power is too much to contain." She started yelling at him for faking a seizure, and he went back to his normal death stare while grumbling about his powers. One girl in my grade, at high school, so 4 years from age 12 through 16, filled a vial with her own blood and wore it around her neck. She also wore cat ears and a tail to school and would chase people around meowing and hissing and trying to scratch them. She was frickin' fast too, especially when she'd climb up the stairs on all fours. Seriously frickin' fast. Like, you'd better get your skates on or she's gonna catch you fast. No, she was not hot. In hindsight, maybe some psychological issues at play, but she wasn't ever part of the special needs program, just a regular student like the rest of us, I guess. And yes, I realized she very likely had an issue that was undiagnosed at the time. I hope she got the help she needed. I have no idea what happened to this young lady after high school. Vanished without a trace. Did some Googling and Facebook stalking, but no dice. During my 6th grade graduation, our class sang a song. Weird kid was standing next to me on stage and suddenly just projectile chucks up and some of it landed on my shoes. Impressively, he still kept singing while I stood there wide-mouthed in horror and disbelief. I'll never forget all the gasps from the crowd. Our kid could throw up on demand. Who was demanding this? You know, as gross as it seems to most of us, I know that if you were in any level of school, there would always be at least one kid who requested this trick on occasion. Maybe just because somebody else didn't believe that this was a thing. But yeah, if you could pull this trick in high school, you would for sure have an audience. Don't go getting ideas though, kids, it's the bad sort of attention. Ran around the hallways making pterodactyl noises with his arms raised up behind him like he was a swimming butterfly? I'm so glad other schools had kids making pterodactyl noises. The collective school experience just doesn't disappoint. I'm from a small town. There was this kid who was a year older, but he was so weird that even the younger kids would pick on him. I didn't really know him, but I put him in the weird but harmless category. He graduated and then decided to rob the local taco time with a shotty. Well, it is a small town. The kids working at the taco time all knew him, and pretty much all the customers in the taco time knew him as well. He got 2 years. A few days before a pep assembly, someone anonymously posted signs all over school that said, "The croc is coming." And obviously I've added an R to that word. Teachers and school administrators were obviously concerned, but clueless. Then they smuggled a live rooster into the assembly, and partway through the opening speech at the assembly, he whipped it out over his head and it went bananas. The entire gym full of kids stood up and started chanting, "Croc! Croc! Croc!" He was not seen at school for a few days afterwards. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. A new lad in my primary school pretended that his real voice was a deep Scottish accent. At some point, he found a piece of broken glass and used it to slice my friend for some reason, and then we never saw him again. And for clarification, the person he sliced was a girl, and she came back to school after going to the hospital. The weird kid was never seen again. He didn't always use the deep Scottish voice. Usually he'd have a normal-sounding voice from what I remember, but then he'd say to us quietly, "This isn't my real voice. My real voice sounds like this," kind of thing. Ours once got caught cranking one out under his desk. I borrowed his phone in like 8th grade as a last resort to look up my math homework. As soon as I type in the P in problem set, I was bombarded with Pornhub results. The guy didn't even use incognito. In a massive snoop move, I just took a glance at his history and found out that he watched porn on his phone almost all day, morning, afternoon, and evening. Another kid got every girl in our grade to sign a contract before he moved in 3rd grade, saying that if he ever returned, they'd owe him 1 date. This motherfricker came back in 11th grade, to every girl's dismay, but forgot about the contracts. Bonus features, there was another kid who got in trouble for trying to start a fire in the toilet, unsuccessfully, of course. The next week he bought supplies and actually did it. Got expelled right there. 8th grade. Then there was another kid who decided, in the same bathroom, that he'd find a guy peeing in a urinal and then pee on him to assert dominance. He wasn't expelled. That was 7th grade. Another kid in 12th grade made a Fortnite joke on Facebook about wanting to shoot his friend with a shotty, before acquiring a chug jug. Some mum took this literally instead of the video game way, and reported a shooting threat to the high school. I'm pretty sure he went to a party because his neighbor let our town Facebook group know that he'd left the house around the time the police were called. There was a whole group of people online calling for a manhunt. He moved away. Then there was one who was a senior when I was a freshman. We were friends adjacent in gym. One day in the locker room, he told me that he did some substances while drunk the night before, and his friends shoved a peanut butter jar in his butt. However, he couldn't get it out. You could see the flat part of the lid under his boxers. I have no idea how he managed to make it through a school day like that. After school, he melted butter and poured it into his crevice, and then squeezed out a massive number 2, pulling the jar out in the process. Definitely thought twice before talking to him again, but we were a killer handball team. I met his mum at the hospital. He's in a mediocre black metal band now. And finally, there was also one kid who I almost killed. It was after nighttime marching band practice last year. I had a car full of children to drive home, and I managed to wrangle everyone into the car by 10:30 p.m. I was getting ready to drive out of the lot when I noticed an extra speed bump that I didn't remember from before. I slammed the brakes down before I hit it and got out to inspect, since I didn't believe that someone had built a bump in the last 4 hours. Lo and behold, it's a body. This weird kid decided to lie down, face first, in black clothes on black asphalt in the black night. I nudged him with my foot and asked him if he was okay. He's mad and tells me I interrupted his nap, and then walks home. I was a couple of inches from ending this guy's life. They would chew the gum stuck under the tables. He pulled down his pants in the middle of a public bathroom and span in a circle while spraying pee everywhere and shouting, "Around the world!" Was in the band during some downtime. Some guy kicks off his shoes and socks and then bites the ends of his toenails off. Most of the class casually migrated towards the other side of the room. He spilled his fruit juice on his desk, then wiped it with his shirt's sleeve and then sucked the juice out of said fabric. "Screw you, I was thirsty." Cut his own hair while in class and mentioned that he'd conquer the world with a revolver. Ended up setting fire to his house and was sent to a mental asylum. Pretty mild stuff. They thrusted against my desk for a solid minute while maintaining eye contact with me and then said, "Thanks," and just walked away. By the way, I'm a guy. This was 15 years ago on my first day at this new school, and I was just eating lunch at my desk, and this guy just walked up and went to town. No context, no introduction, nothing. Didn't even buy me dinner first, just wham bam, thank you desk. Poured his juice on a table at lunch and suction cupped his mouth over it and inhaled it like a Hoover when you put it directly onto the hard floor. This guy is a lawyer now. Well, nothing surprising there to be honest. I could see Harvey Specter slurping up a juice box from his desk between million-dollar lawsuits. And by the way, on a serious note, this is a good reminder that no matter how far people see you go in your weird stage in school, you can always bounce back. The weird kid in our school was part of our friendship group, so 15 years or more later, we still give him crap about it. During assembly one afternoon, a few weeks from ball or prom, he went up on stage while our entire year was filling into the auditorium and taking our seats. He was part of the AV club. Surprise! So his responsibility was making sure the microphones worked, so nobody questioned why he was up there tinkering with the mic. Anyway, 90% of our year has come in at this point when he starts singing Jumper by Third Eye Blind over a karaoke version of the song that he found on LimeWire, and he's changed the "my friend" part of the chorus to the name of the girl he wants to ask out to prom. He gets about halfway through the song before one of the teachers realizes it isn't a joke and gets up on stage to drag him out. Everyone's just sitting there going, what the frick? Half the kids don't know the song, and the other half is wondering why he chose it to ask somebody out. Turns out the girl he was asking wasn't even in the auditorium yet, so didn't hear his little number. He got a detention for a week for being disruptive, but since then we just called him Jumper as a joke. But then it stuck, and I don't think anyone in our friend group has used his name since then. Even during his wedding, you could tell who he went to school with since they'd ask where Jumper or Big J was. The albino kid in school. He'd take off running down the hallway with one hand straight out in front of him and yell, "White lightning!" He was weird, but everyone liked him. The weird kid, Dan, was obsessed with one cute girl, Casey, for several years. She rejected him for several years. On the bus to a field trip, I sat next to him and he was drawing. I glanced over and he was drawing Casey falling off a cliff onto a patch of spikes below. Years later in middle school, he also got really angry and threw a desk across the room in English. Not a small desk either. One of those ones that's a chair with a desk attached kinda hybrid. Just frickin' yeeted it across the room. Was frickin' terrified. There's a whole litany of things he did, but those ones stand out to me. One time, some kid smeared number 2 on the walls of the restroom, but nobody found out who did it. Also, for those of you who are assuming it was me, it wouldn't be possible since I stopped using school restrooms to go number 2 since 4th grade, and this happened 2 years ago when I was in 7th grade. I don't even know how the inside of that restroom looks like. We were getting DNA samples in biology. Most of the class used spit, but he tried to squeeze milk out of his chest. Yes, he. This was when we were 14 to 15. This guy shanked me with a number 2 pencil in my collarbone area. I went to the hospital, but they said I was fine. My stepdad said I'd do anything to get out of school. Screw both those guys. My brother is a high school teacher, and he once texted me that he caught a kid cutting his downstairs hair in class. There was another kid, not even from his class, who randomly ran into the classroom, took some binders out of a bookcase and started jumping up and down on them. Then he ran out of the classroom again. I don't know, I'm pretty sure I was the weird kid. She barked at people and tried to scratch behind her ears and sniffed people's butts at recess. She was 14. Apparently, he put a teaspoon up his butt in assembly. This is going to sound ridiculous, but during my senior year of high school, somebody took a huge, and I mean inhumanly huge, number 2 in one of the girls' bathroom toilets that was far too big to be flushed away. Some kid mentioned seeing it, and in no time, somehow the entire school was made aware and gathered around the bathroom trying to get a look at this monstrosity. Picture, if you can, more than 50 high school kids skipping classes just to try to squeeze into a small women's bathroom to stare in awe at an infamous mound. The crowd got so big and unruly that the administration finally caught on and banned people from that particular hallway for the rest of the day under threat of suspension. I like to believe that all of us were that weird kid on that day. He did the deed with a duck, allegedly. You know, I didn't see him at school after that, if I'm remembering correctly. He gave me a handful of blue Pop Rocks. He was actually really sweet. In 4th grade, a girl ate a whole mechanical pencil just next to me. She regularly ate whole sheets of paper and erasers. The pencil really sticks out in my mind, though. To clarify, yes, it was the entire mechanical pencil. She took it apart piece by piece and just kinda crunched all the big parts like a candy bar. This girl also thought she was a horse and would gallop, neigh, and fight anyone who said she wasn't. So this was pretty much expected by the time she was my desk partner. He was a genius, scored in the top of the class all the time. One day he called a friend of mine and said, "Hey, what are you doing this afternoon? Do you want to come here so we can design a time travel machine?" Who knows when he is now? I was in economics class and this quiet Asian kid was on his laptop. The head of the school's IT storms into the classroom and starts yelling at him along the lines of, "You've messed up the whole network," drags him out of the class, and we never saw that kid again. Peed his pants on the last day. He was so close, he nearly got away as a normie. In grade 8, this kid would bring a bar of soap with a hole in it and just do the deed with it in class. We'd whisper to him, "Psst, hey, how was it?" And he'd give us a grin and a thumbs up while we giggled. That was 32 years ago. Recently found out he's a big-shot neurosurgeon in England somewhere. Who would have thought? What caused a decades-long, stable marriage to end out of nowhere? Had to watch my parents go through the paperwork to get divorced after my dad had a massive stroke and was forced to retire. It was the only way for them to keep the money from his pension and maintain his health insurance coverage. My parents got a divorce of convenience so that Pops could make the mortgage payments and get his insulin. Thankfully, my parents' insurance agent is a close friend and found every possible form and loophole so that they could stay in the house together. It took almost 2 years to get everything settled. I'll never forget my dad's statement after it was all done. "The church says we're still married, and that's what matters to us. At least now your mother can still get her hearing aids and pay the mortgage if something happens to me." I was so disgusted with it all. I never forgave my dad's union for it, and we now make sure someone from our family shows up to their annual open meeting when they discuss the health insurance plan to shame them in explicit detail with how the board screws over the roughnecks. You know, my husband tried to kill me, which I feel is impolite. 23 years. I'd lied to her several times over the years and she always forgave me. The last time, I lied to her about accruing a severe amount of debt due to a gambling addiction. I think she might have forgiven the lie, but she couldn't forgive the addiction and the chance that I'd start gambling again. I started attending Gamblers Anonymous after I told her, but it was too little too late. On the plus side, I haven't gambled for almost 3 years now. It was a struggle at first, but it gets easier as long as I take it one day at a time. I've made some amazing friends in my local recovery community, and I run a meeting once a week to help others that are suffering. There's a guy in my town that everyone knows about because he owns this huge mansion in a middle-class neighborhood. Apparently, he was married to a woman for a long time, but she left him, calling him a loser because his business hadn't taken off yet. After she left him, his business finally took off. He sells medical equipment to hospitals, and he became FU levels of rich in a few years. The reason he built the mansion in that neighborhood was because that's where she lives, so she has to drive by the mansion on her way to work every day. The script that I'm gathering people's answers for after this one that I'm currently writing is about people's acts of petty revenge, and for a second there I wasn't sure if I'd pulled from the wrong group of comments. This is brilliantly jerky. And if they really were married for 10 or more years with her patiently waiting before it came together for him, before finally throwing in the towel, this must have been incredibly frustrating. My mum filed for divorce after 27 years with my dad. Us kids were out of the house, and I think she had a midlife crisis that if she decided to do nothing, then that's how she'd die. In that house, doing nothing but things that make the days go by faster. I do believe an old high school flame helped her make the decision as well. At first I was hurt, but as I get older now, I completely get why. My dad prefers routine over excitement and had a habit of saving us poor when we didn't need to. At first it was a financial requirement, and then it became an obsession for him. My mum wanted to travel and experience new things in her later years, and she deserves that. My dad deserves to live how he wants to as well. Today I see two happier people, and that makes me happy. My parents got divorced after 22 years of marriage. They were never in love and didn't even like each other. They had me and then my sister a few years later and wanted to stay together for the kids. 12 years after I was born, they had my brother, and that kept the cycle going. I wish I could say that they're happy now, but they still like to cause trouble for each other. We're due our first child soon, and they're going to have to figure out how to be grandparents together. Thankfully, I'm 1,500 miles from them, so it won't be a headache very often. I worked at a law firm that only practiced family law, so we're talking divorces, child custody, wills, and estates. At one time, we had like 8 clients getting divorced after 20-plus years of marriage, and they were all high-ranking military men whose wives came out of the closet after all of their kids had grown up and moved out of the house, and these guys were getting ready to retire. I thought it was so weird, but I guess for whatever reason, the women thought that their duties to their husbands and families were coming to an end and they wanted to live for themselves. I guess I know why they couldn't come out 30 years ago, it was a different time, but I was curious why they were all attracted to military guys. I assume maybe because it meant their husbands would be away for years at a time during their service? I think it depends more on how old the women were when they were first married. Military people often tend to marry young and quickly. You don't know yourself when you're young. 20 years will do that to you. My parents split up after nearly 30 years. My dad was a butthole my entire life, so when they finally divorced, I was 18, and there was no surprise. He had been cheating for years, and I think he was the one who finally asked for it. I think my mum stayed because she couldn't afford to start over. She spent her life putting my dad through school and wasn't educated herself. She had no family or anyone who could help her either. There were definitely some confidence issues on her part as well. My parents divorced when I was 12. They thought I'd be devastated, but the only thing I could say was, "Thank God, what took you so long?" I don't think I could have endured it 6 more years. My husband began surreptitiously going to exotic dance clubs. He stole about $200 a week from various accounts and a business that I owned to fund those activities. He lost his job because he went there so often at lunch and would just stay. We had young kids, so I stayed after he got some therapy. He was never honest with the therapist. About a year ago, I learned he was doing it again. Plus texting the exotic dancers. My youngest kid graduates high school this year. I've done what's best for everyone else for 20 years now. This September was 21 years, and I don't anticipate having a 22nd anniversary. It's really scary to think of being alone. I don't hate him. I feel sorry for him. I know he'll feel very sad and lonely when I'm gone. But being near him feels like having my soul ripped from my body every day. Therapy changed my mind. After more than a decade of being miserable, I finally got help. When I was able to really talk about my marriage was when I finally realized I needed to get the F out. At the end of the day, I stayed in a crappy marriage because the thought of being alone scared me. Through therapy, I was clued into how many wonderfully supportive friends and family members I had if I just reached out to them. I wasn't going to be in a relationship anymore, but I wasn't alone either. Not myself, but my parents. They were married for 22 years when they separated, 24 years by the time the divorce was final. From the perspective of a child in the situation, there's no way that they were happy together. There was hardly ever a quiet moment in the house because of my father's temper, but my mother knew how to serve it back too. However, the final straw was more of a chain of events. My father had a very rigid view of the family. Man works, woman stays home, cares for the home and the children. When I was in high school, my father got injured at work and needed surgery. He worked a physically demanding job and would be out for 6 months. My mother, knowing that we were already falling behind on the vehicle and house payments, decided to find part-time employment. She worked while the kids were in school. It was still important to her to see her kids get on the bus and be there when they got home. My father immediately believed that she was cheating on him. He installed a tracker and tape recorder in her car. He showed up at her workplace and caused a scene multiple times. He interrogated her co-workers. He spent most of the time at the house drinking. This was not an equal partnership, and it never really was. You should have seen how hurt he acted when my mum finally asked for a divorce. But he rebounded real quick, let me tell you. All he had to do was tell some woman on Plenty of Fish his sob story, and he moved right into her house. He spent a couple of years treating her and her children horribly before she kicked him out as well. Only took him a couple of weeks in a hotel to find another woman to let him move in. What a charmer. Nasty controlling dirtbag aside, I'm mainly mind-blown that Plenty of Fish was surviving as a dating app when that comment was written in 2019. I only had it for a while when I had my garbage Windows phone before Tinder finally became available on that, and Plenty of Fish was dead in the water like a decade ago. Maybe that's why Rebound #1 was so starved for choice in his story. This video is not sponsored by Plenty of Fish. That last guy sounds like my grandpa, except when he started drinking and accusing Grandma of cheating, he beat the crap out of her. It all backfired one day, though. Grandpa had 7 sons, all really good wrestlers and boxers, because Grandpa thought men should know how to fight. One day they ganged up on Grandpa. They were between 8 and 17 and they beat the crap out of him. They tied him to a tree and left him outside all night. Then they told him they'd kill him if he ever drank or hit Grandma again. It's crazy to me because I only ever got to meet the nice version of Grandpa who didn't drink. Parents divorced after 25 years when my mum had what we thought at the time was a midlife crisis. She told my dad by draining $3,000 from the joint checking account to fund her divorce lawyer. 6 years later, they were officially divorced since she blew through that money on different lawyers that kept firing her as a client. We later ruled out midlife crisis when her behavior started to become more odd, erratic, and paranoid. She was in her early 50s when this behavior started. Now we, by whom I mean myself and my sister-in-law, both of whom have psychology experience, think that she has late-onset bipolar, and I say think since we can't get her officially diagnosed since she believes nothing is wrong with her. She lives in New York and it's super hard to commit someone there unless they're a danger to themselves or other people. And she's not dangerous, she just can't hold down a job and lives in her car due to her own insubordinate, sporadic paranoid behavior. But of course she blames everyone else. No, she's not a narcissist, she's just mentally ill, since she was never like this when we were growing up. She was very selfless and caring when she was younger. We were together 20 years, married for 15. We started as high school sweethearts, but we eventually realized that we weren't the same people we were when we fell in love. We also realized that that wasn't going to change. We decided that the best way for everyone to be happy for the rest of our lives was to end it on peaceful terms before we were both 70 and resentful of each other for trapping each other in an unhappy marriage for more than 40 years. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I've been married for 20 years and we are on the edge. The answer is that life just changes you. When you start out the relationship, it's its own thing, it's cultivated and it grows. Then over the years you add some children and full-time jobs and there's less to cultivate, or nothing. You end up becoming life partners to run the household and you wonder why you're even together. Since there are no good times, all that's left are the arguments and bad times. This is all normal, and on top of that you're both going through the personal struggles of living. To be honest, staying married is tougher than most people think in an age without divorce social stigma. The kids do keep you together, hoping that somehow you can rekindle something that once existed. And this isn't a situation with two good people trying to do the right thing. We're not even talking about a toxic situation where people are mistreating each other. My dad filed for divorce after 25 years of marriage. My mum was shell-shocked. My dad was absolutely miserable, but the signs of a failed marriage were always present. Dad was very emotional and is quick to anger. He's never really handled failure very effectively and would be mad instead of constructive. My mum is very family-oriented and was adamant that we never move farther than 40 miles from Chicago. Heck, when I was going away to college, she bawled to my dad to force me to go to a school closer to home. In a way, I think my dad resented my mum for never letting him travel or get away from Chicago. It also doesn't help that I'm fairly certain my mum became undiagnosed depressed once her mum died. All she'd do was her bare minimum at her job as a school bus driver, then come home and sleep, finish her route for the day, cook a hamburger helper meal for the family, and then play Angry Birds on her iPad. It's really weird seeing your parents divorce in your 20s. You're adult enough to speak candidly, and neither of them likes what you have to say about them during or after the fact. The silver lining out of it is my sisters and I know how not to behave in a relationship. We were together for 20 years, but only married for 13 of them. Our interests just diverged over the years. I got more into music and art and wanted to go to festivals and stuff, and she wanted to F her boss. I'm very grateful our attempts to have kids failed. It's much easier to make a clean break that way. Not me, but my grandmother once told me that she was considering divorcing her husband of over 50 years. The reason she gave me was, "We stayed together for the kids, and now the kids are all grown up and have lives of their own. And now I can't ignore the small things about him that annoy me." She didn't go through with it, but she seemed sincere when she said it. It broke my heart, especially since I only ever saw the best side of him. My mum left my dad on their 30th wedding anniversary. He had been in and out of rehab 3 times at that point and couldn't commit to quitting drinking. She couldn't stay and watch him drink himself to death anymore. Didn't get divorced, but started the process after about 25 years. Then we stuck it out for a few more years after the kids, and I ended up falling in love with her after the kids moved out. Relationships follow cycles, so I'm glad that I stuck it out. I thought I'd pop in a little bit of sunlight amidst all the divorce, although I guess that's not to say that divorce isn't just objectively the correct decision for some relationships. If there's one thing we're seeing a lot of here, it's often that both parties and the kids would sometimes be better off with the partners no longer together. I'm glad it worked out for this last commenter, though. She cheated for years, plain and simple, ended our 22-year marriage. To be honest, I don't even want to work through it. Now that we've separated for a while, I realize how toxic she had become, and I'm a much better man without her. My dad had multiple affairs, and my mum got tired of it. There was also the alcoholism and the fact that both parents were workaholics. My dad remarried a lovely woman, and so did my mum. Oh, that might have been an issue too. This lady I work with, her and her husband had been married almost 30 years. They had 2 kids, both in their mid to late teens, and a full life together. She was the stay-at-home mum, and he made the big bucks. Anyways, once the kids both started to grow up and stop wanting to go to the cottage, they realized that when left alone, they didn't have too much in common. Then the kids started leaving for school, and I guess things just got worse. I think everything would have been fine if not for the father's dad, the grandfather, getting sick. Turns out the old man had near $4 million to his name and was giving all of it to the father. So, Dad consults a lawyer who says that since it's an inheritance, if he's divorced before he gets it, he can keep all of it, and as such, he divorces her within days. She stopped working for us shortly after, but I know it was really hard on her. She got her fair shake of the currently owned assets, but couldn't touch the $4 million. I should say that there's no world in which she should deserve the entire sum or anything. Do I think there's grounds that maybe she should get some of it? I don't know. I guess you'd need to know the relationship. What if the grandfather was sick and lived with them for 15 years during his sickness, and as such, she was his primary caregiver? Would that have entitled her to monetary compensation? Again, I don't have the answer, but I don't believe it's ever an easy answer when things like this arise. My parents got divorced because of my dad. We grew up in a military family, and Dad was always deployed. My mum was a walking medical disaster, no offense to her. RA at 23, endometriosis at 24, got a hysterectomy and everything. They married early and had kids really early as well because of the endometriosis. My mum tried to cater to my dad and make sure he could still live his life in his mid-20s because they had kids earlier than expected. Well, being deployed all the time meant that my dad could just F around with ladies off in other places. My mum stayed home and took care of us. Dad got a divorce when he got back and got remarried like 3 months later. That lasted 2 years before she got her green card and then ditched him. My mum still loves him despite him moving on to his 3rd marriage, having another kid, and never actually paying his portion of child support. So pretty much they got divorced so that my dad could have a younger, more subservient wife. Ugh. My grandparents initiated divorce proceedings a month after my dad, the youngest of his siblings, graduated college. They'd stayed together to provide a stable home for their children, and once they'd all left the nest, my grandparents were ready to move on. My grandparents met and married in the 50s. Super Catholic family, 6 kids in 9 years or thereabouts. Husband worked, wife took care of the family dynamic. It was honestly a lot of little things that my grandma eventually got tired of first. First trying to wrangle her 3 boys, all with difficult personalities, to church, so they stopped going. Then it was the things he did like not helping with the difficult kids, which he saw as woman's work, not helping with the household chores, because that's what kids are for, being emotionally distant, he's a man and didn't do emotional stuff, and from the way my grandma tells it, she stuck it out so long because she thought that's what a good Catholic woman did, be long-suffering and patient. It wasn't until she started exploring outside of Catholicism that she decided she'd suffered long enough. The divorce ended up being civil and mutual. Grandpa was never one for causing a scene, you see. And both of my grandparents ended up in loving, understanding second relationships. Neither of them remarried officially. Funny random side note, when I graduated high school in 2012, my mother invited both my grandparents to the graduation. By that time, they'd been divorced for longer than they'd been married. 20-odd years together and 30 years divorced by my math, and they didn't even recognize each other until after the ceremony. My dad was very vocal that he was staying because of us kids. His dad abandoned my grandma and their kids when he was really little. He had never forgiven his dad and was determined not to do the same thing to his own kids. While I admire him for, quote, doing the right thing, I'm a little resentful because all they ever did was fight, because he couldn't quit screwing around and it was unbearable being around it. My man killed the dog. She was getting older, and if left alone for more than 7 hours, she'd pee in the basement on the cement. I'd check daily and mop if needed, but we were in the process of buying a new house, and he decided she wasn't coming with us. Rather than discussing it with me, he took the easy route and made her disappear while I was at work. Having to console my young sons that evening and seeing her trauma was the straw that broke the camel's back for me. My heart closed to him instantly. My parents were together for 24 years. My dad left my mum after his best friend, who was 6 years younger than him, died. My dad went into a depression about his own life and left my mum for some witch at his work because he felt like he was missing out on life by being with my mum. Probably a little unfair to just slander the person he ended up with, although I guess we're missing a lot of context here. Maybe they cheated, maybe she sends you all personalized hate mail every day, but based on what we have here, we can't just decide that she's a witch. 21 years together with my ex, only married for 16 though. We both had a non-loving home situation, so maybe that drove us together. We bought our first house when we were 3 years together, and since then, there was always the fear of being left alone. Leave the other one and myself in debts. We bought a second home, sold the first one, had kids, lovely twin daughters, and bought a third home. We sold the second one. But my wife still wasn't happy with life, and this all pushed down on me. There was no affection between us. Also, I was very insecure about myself. I thought women didn't really like me. But then my eyes opened, I started doing yoga, went to a therapist, and after a year or two, I felt secure enough to make this really heavy decision. The toughest part was for my daughters, who were 9 back then. I really quickly met someone new, and after her, someone else. So my complexes about my looks were completely gone. I started a new life, my kids are okay with it now. It was the hardest, but also best decision in my life. Also, my ex had it really hard. She didn't see it coming, although she told me several times she wanted to divorce. She blamed me for everything, but now she also has someone new and mutual friends are telling me she's happy. So I think for her, this was a good thing after all. Some couples just grow apart. After 20 years, you're two entirely different people. It's hard to stay together. This is the general answer. Yes, people stay together for kids a lot, but overall, this is the root of the answer. People just change over time, which is good. Growth is good, you just need to make sure you're growing together. It's part of a healthy relationship. I think when we talk about relationships, we tend to generalize them and not talk about how much commitment and hard work they are to keep going. But rather, we like to talk about the good side of it, which is why we work so hard. I'm just shy of 25 years with my wife, and while I love her and can't imagine ever being married to another woman, she's driven me crazy enough to think about divorce multiple times. But my commitment to her, those funny vow things, means that that's never really an option. What's the ultimate petty revenge that you've seen or been a part of? You young'uns here might not believe it, but back in the early 90s, supermarket cashiers had to type every price by hand. I was at a Vons in San Diego, walking towards the only open check stand with a single bottle of soda in my hand. Suddenly, this hoity-toity lady with a cart, stacked to the top, flew out of one of the aisles like a freight train and cut me off. "I'm in a hurry," she said, and then looked away like she was annoyed that I'd been born. I looked at the cashier. He rolled his eyes and got to work. 5 minutes later, she's walking out of the door and it's my turn. "You're good," says the cashier. "I put your soda on her tag." Damn, that felt good. I used to deliver pizza for Domino's. It was my last shift, and there was this house that was always rude, never tipped. Once I called to ask what the house looked like, and they said, I gave you the address and just hung up. Always stuff like that. I got to their house and they gave me a check for 1 cent less than the total was. I said, I'm gonna need that extra penny. They grumbled and took their time, hoping I'd give up, but I just sat there, holding the pizza. They came back all angry and gave me the penny. You should note that they had no intention of tipping. After they gave me the penny, I chucked it onto the street and left. They saw me do it, and it was satisfying. I delivery drive, and we have this problem house that these 2 girls live at that always try and underpay and play it off by accident. We've been delivering to them for well over a year. It's really sad. Anyway, one of the drivers had enough of their bullcrap and said to them, "You know, you're almost $1 off, but I can tell you need it, so I'll let it slide." They were definitely teed off, but they still order from us quite a bit. I knew a kid in elementary school. He jumped across a table and tried to choke me out. I got suspended for instigating it by saying he was cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs when that was the only thing that kid ever talked about, and he was wearing a Cocoa Puffs shirt that day. Senior year of high school, that same kid was in my design class. He needed to get a C or better on the final. Over the year, I found out the kid was taking work off my shared drive. High school IT was dumb, and each kid's folder was public. The kid was straight up copying me. So for the final, I purposefully effed up the drawing in my folder, but that kid didn't double-check it. He turned it in and failed and had to go back and be a super senior. In short, kid choked me out, I waited 10 years and then made them fail high school. There was this kid, about 15, who cut in front of me at the supermarket. When he wasn't watching, I broke his chocolate bar while still inside the wrapper. Later I saw him cycling by, opening his bar and half of it fell out. He threw a tantrum and I chuckled. That went from being mildly inconvenient to actually really good revenge, and pretty much proportionate to his crime against you. Good job. I occasionally deliver pizza as a part-time job. There's a customer that tends to pay with a big bag of change. And I don't mean a bag full of quarters, I mean a bag full of dimes, nickels, and pennies. Since his meal typically costs him about $20, the bag usually weighs several pounds. It is a pain to count out all of the change, so typically drivers will just assume he has the correct amount and leave. Usually he has just enough or maybe a few cents over. I don't think it's an innocent thing either, as he usually gives a big bag of change with a crap-eating grin. It's such a pain that most of the drivers know his address by heart and avoid going to his house at all if possible. I was having a bad night and by the luck of the draw I got this guy's house. I remember reading a post on the Petty Revenge Reddit involving someone paying in a checkout line with a bag of change, and I knew I could use a similar method to take my frustration out on this guy in the pettiest way possible. I pulled up to his house and left the pizza in the car. I rang the doorbell, and when he answered, I saw the large bag of change in his hand that I knew would be there. He asked where his pizza was, and I said, "New policy, sir. Gotta count it all out before we can give out the pizza." So I sat down on his doorstep and started to count out all the change. At one point, I even asked if he could turn on his porch light because I was having a hard time seeing. He did end up sitting there while I counted out the entire bag of change, even though it took about 10 minutes. He ended up being about $1 over, so I started picking up pennies to give him his change back. He then said I could keep the rest as a tip. When I gave him his pizza, he sheepishly told me sorry and then shut the door. The whole situation was incredibly awkward, and to my knowledge, he hasn't ordered pizza from us in a while. Oh well. A girl on my softball team bullied me and spread rumors about me to the team and coaches. We were competing for the same position. She was in my geometry class and tried to buddy up to me because I was good at geometry, and she wasn't. So for a while I let her copy my homework, and then one day I gave her all the wrong answers and turned in the right answers for myself. My roommate in college was a selfish jerk. Now, I've known him since preschool and we're still friends, but he's one of those people you can't live with. He attended the local tech school that's supposed to be a pipeline into the main school that third roommate and I attended. However, he barely went to class and sat around smoking doobies and playing Xbox. My Xbox specifically, which is where this story begins. He used to have friends over all the time, and mostly they'd just get baked and play Xbox in the living room. Now, I don't like having a TV in my bedroom, so I set up my flat screen and Xbox in the living room. I'd like to note that both he and a third roommate had Xboxes as well, but they had theirs set up in their respective rooms. When the latest Call of Duty at the time came out, we'd spend hours playing together in a big squad. That is until the third roommate's Xbox got the red ring of death. Shortly after, my Xbox got the red ring of death. Well, we think that's all good because jerk roommate has the next Xbox 360 and that wasn't prone to the same issue. We'll just move his Xbox out to the living room so we can keep playing COD Zombies, right? The response the third roommate and I got was, and I quote, Nah, I don't want people playing it all the time because it'll probably break. Plus, what if you and the third roommate are playing it and I want to play it by myself? We were livid. How could he spend all of that time using my stuff and not extend the same courtesy? My real gripe wasn't that I couldn't use his Xbox, it was because we no longer would sit down as three friends, crack some beers, and laugh, having fun trying to beat each other's high round score in zombies. It was like us being social together stopped because he wanted to play Modern Warfare 2 by himself and just shut us out. At the time, I'd supplied the router for internet in the house, which meant I alone had the admin password. I found out you can block specific MAC addresses. Well, guess who couldn't connect to Xbox Live when he wanted to play online? I'd turn it on and off sporadically over the next few weeks. I found out he spent like 4 hours calling both Time Warner and Microsoft trying to get the issue resolved. Eventually, he started to put 2 and 2 together about it when I'd go out and come back. You'd think I'd stop, but I adapted. I found out you could open a port to remotely access your router from the internet. At the time, I had a BlackBerry, I know, which could load the HTML router configuration page. Thus, I started turning off his access when I was home. I was even away one weekend at our rival school, and I shut him down 3 hours away. To this day, he still doesn't know it was me. I still go over to his house and hang out on the weekends. Screw you, dude. I know they taught us sharing in preschool. And to those saying I was the jerk in the situation, I think you're confused that this was some sort of revenge or friendship-ending act when it was really just me elaborately pranking a friend of 20+ years. Yes, he was a jerk in the sense that he was still immature in a lot of ways because he'd never lived on his own, he never cleaned, did his part in the household. He's cool now that life smacked him around a bit, he just needed to grow up at the time. My roommate and her significant other loved doing elaborate jigsaw puzzles. After I found out she cancelled our lease, leaving me 1 week to find a new place to live, which she could do because I was 17 and not able to legally sign a lease, I threw away one piece of 2 different puzzles that they were working on. When me and my ex-fiancé were having a bunch of arguments after we broke up, I got tired of her constantly texting me about nonsense, so I call insert phone carrier here to have them cut off service to her phone that I paid for in the middle of an argument. Not the most mature post we've had, although I suppose mature and petty rarely line up together, do they? And you were well within your right to do so. It would be even more petty if she immediately joined another phone service just to keep going at you. My neighbor's dog craps in our yard all the time. It wouldn't be a big deal except he never cleans up after her. I finally had enough, so I decided to go with a classic. I put a flaming bag of this dog's crap on his porch, rang the bell, and hid in the bushes. When he answered the door, I finally got my revenge by having an affair with his wife that lasted for 3.5 years. My sister said some pretty mean things to me in front of my friends when I was younger, so I put a slice of bologna in her Walkman CD player. I got the idea from Corey in the show That's So Raven. Early in a game of Civilization V, Alexander stole Petra from me at the last second. So I built a special city in the frozen wastes, blocked it with my own cities, gifted it to him, and then burned the rest of his empire to the ground. It took about 5 hours. I like to think he learned his lesson, but that Ford-settling D-bag still looks as smug as ever. My little brother and his girlfriend came to stay at my house for the weekend, and the girlfriend was super self-centered and obnoxious. When they left, she forgot her clothes and toiletries because she'd left them sprawled all over my bathroom. About a week later, she and my brother moved into an apartment together. After he paid for the moving truck, deposit, and utilities, she cheated on him with her ex and kicked him out of the apartment. This left him broke, homeless, and heartbroken. In the days after the cleanup, she kept calling and emailing him several times per day, demanding that he ask me to ship her clothes and toiletries back to her. I mean, it's really important. It's my North Face. My brother called and pleaded with me to ship them to her so she'd stop having a reason to contact him. Being the loving sister that I am, I gathered up the really important North Face sweatshirt, shorts, underwear, shampoo, conditioner, soap, and razor. I folded everything nicely. I then wrote a nice note apologizing for taking so long to mail them out to her, and let her know that I hope all is well. The note was written in permanent marker, and the paper happened to be resting on the really important North Face when I wrote it. Unfortunately, in a turn of events that nobody could have predicted, the ink bled straight through the paper and onto the shirt. Also unfortunately, the shampoo, soap, and conditioner caps were not tightly secured on their bottles, and the contents leaked out all over the clothes, further spreading the ink. The most unfortunate result, though, was that her razor didn't have any sort of protective cap or container, and left little slashes all over the really important North Face. She received the package, and my brother never heard from her again. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My wife used to keep all of these little Godiva chocolates that she likes in her desk at work, but then she started noticing several of them going missing and figured it must be from someone from the overnight cleaning staff taking them. Fed up with losing her not inexpensive treats, she decided to get revenge on the choco thief in question by replacing the good chocolate with little squares of chocolate laxatives that looked just like real candies. The next morning, she saw several of the laxatives gone, and from that day forward, she was never missing another one of her good chocolates ever again. Sounds a lot like a similar story I heard last week. A guy was tired of his roommate drinking his milk, so he put laxatives in the milk, and the roommate had to go to hospital because he got so dehydrated. He just told the guy he must be allergic to milk. When I was a kid, I attempted to call my aunt. For whatever reason, I accidentally dialed a 6 instead of a 3, and this man cursed me out for being a telemarketer. I was so stunned I didn't even hang up initially. My petty revenge was giving the number to all of my friends, and for about 2 weeks we called him every day at all hours. I used to work shifts many years ago, including regular night shifts. My boss was an unpleasant person to say the least. He'd leave his keys on top of his locker. So one night I took a small file to work and filed down 1 or 2 teeth from his front door key. The next day, he was telling everyone how he got home and his door lock was broken and he had to get a locksmith out, which cost a fortune, and he didn't get much sleep. Wouldn't you know it, it happened again a couple of months later. Then his car key got the same treatment. I stopped after that as I heard him mention it was getting suspicious that all these locks stopped working. But unknown to me, other colleagues also disliked him. One night, his locker disappeared entirely. Rumor has it that it's part of the foundations of an office block in London now. The boss paged me on my wedding night. Yeah, it's on me for leaving the pager on, but in my defense, it automatically turned on after charging, and I wanted to have a full battery before setting off on my honeymoon trip. He did this as a joke, but it came at, shall we say, an inappropriate moment. We had a page only if something's on fire policy, so I had to call in even though I'd just gotten married and was about to go on 2 weeks vacation. When he answered, he laughed so hard that I just had to do something about it. So when I got back, I programmed the mail servers to call out on their phone lines, and I hit his pager with dial-back numbers for those phone service lines where women pretend to be enjoying your company and describe what exactly they'd do to you. These would hit his pager at 4 a.m. every day. His wife got to his pager once before he did one time and saw a text message with something like, "I loved how you describe how you do me, Jerry. Call me back when your wife's gone for the day." The wife, funnily enough, was not amused. She thought he'd been calling naughty phone operators and tore him a new one. He knew it was me, but he was too stubborn to ask me to call it off. So it kept up for weeks until he finally figured out where the script was running from and used it to page me instead. We had a back and forth pager war for a while, but then it all messed up when an actual data center emergency happened and one of us ignored the page, thinking that it was the other person pranking him. So that ended the fun. Well, you may have overblown your revenge just a tad by constantly raising suspicion of him cheating on his partner, but it has to be said that the both of you seem okay with this ongoing prank war and didn't just ask or tell the other one to stop, so fair go, I guess. Probably for the best that it stopped, though. I started in a new job 2 years ago and hated a guy that kept joking about me, so I got his phone number and announced his PS4 for sale for like $50. Same day during lunch, he was already going nuts because of the calls. Of course, he found a way to remove it, but it was nice to watch. When I was in 7th grade, the startup my dad was part of was failing miserably, in no small part due to a crazy CEO. While at his house, my dad observed the CEO's toddler daughter picking up a piece of dog crap and licking it. He picked her up and told her to give Dad a kiss. A horrible former coworker always claimed that she worked more hours than she actually did, and when she was at work, she just browsed Facebook all day. The doctor/owner was a very hands-off guy and just let her do whatever she wanted, despite me going to him with proof. So I decided to take revenge. She wasn't computer savvy at all, so I removed Internet Explorer from her desktop and installed an identical icon that, when clicked, would instantly restart the computer. It was so satisfying when she'd just forget and click it, losing anything that she was working on. She'd always grumble and complain about the virus on her computer. I started a new job about 3 weeks later, and when I left, it was still giving her problems. My mum and dad. This happened when I was in my late 20s. My mum and I were in the car, my dad called and they started bickering with each other. My mum got irritated and hung up on him. He called her right back, and when she answered, he hung up on her. Didn't even say a word, just waited for her to say hello and then hung up. It was so petty and hilarious to see my parents acting like children. I couldn't stop laughing. They've been married for over 35 years. I still get tickled when I think about it. I lived in a cheap, crappy apartment with roommates and we all worked in fast food. Money was tight. One roommate ended up unemployed for a few weeks and then got a job as a bank teller, making much better money. However, while unemployed, she had missed a rent payment which she had scraped together to cover for her. 2 weeks into the new job, she gets her first paycheck. Obviously, we're expecting immediate payback. Day 1, she said something along the lines of she couldn't do the personal business of cashing her check during work, so she could pay us in a couple of days. The Friday she was supposed to pay us, she comes home with a big shopping bag and casually mentions she can't pay back rent yet because she had to buy new work clothes. When the roommates and I got upset, she went total B-word on us that we didn't understand how to work a professional job because we were only food service, and basically told us we'd get our money when she felt like it. That weekend, she misplaced her name tag required at work. She spent hours searching for it. At some point, I came across the name tag in a random spot and I said nothing. She kept searching for it all weekend and was panicked that she'd look bad to her new boss. I never moved or took the name tag, but the whole time I knew where it was. She never found it and had to get a new one. She also never paid back the rent, and we kicked her out a few weeks later. In grade school, I kept a bag of chips in the same pocket every day of my backpack. This kid I knew would punch that pocket any chance he'd get for 5 days in a row. One day, I replaced the chips with a bag of sewing pins, and he never did it again. Sweet, sweet justice. I worked at a 50k tech company. I worked with a PM, Maggie, who misread my email and got her dates messed up. She scheduled a meeting for Thursday instead of Friday. When I told her she'd scheduled the wrong day, she got mad at me and emailed all of my managers up to my vice president, that's 4 levels of management, to say how much of a troublemaker I was. It was her own fault for not being able to read. 2 years later, I have to work with her again, and I pretend like I'm all happy and friends with her. 2 years after that, I quit and move on to a better company. I get an email saying that Maggie's applying to my new company and said I could provide a positive reference for her. I email the recruiter and blast all of my 6 years of crap on her, and I block her from getting hired. Take that, Maggie, you B-word. I never forget. During my freshman year of high school, I was in a biology class that was made up of mainly juniors. This one guy who sat next to me would always be a jerk to me during class. I always did well on the tests, so he'd look over and copy the answers from my Scantron. I'm pretty sure that he didn't realize that I knew he was cheating off me. Well, one day I got fed up with this guy messing with me and cheating off me, so the next test comes around and sure enough he starts copying my answers. I finish the test and so does he. He gets up and turns his test in and comes back to his seat. I looked him in the eyes and proceeded to erase my entire Scantron. I then retook the test, this time marking the correct answers. The look of panic in his eyes was so satisfying. He ended up making a 2% on that test and never cheated off me again. I was going to say how's that possible to guess on a Scantron and only get 2%, but then I realized you purposefully chose the wrong answers at a 98% accuracy. Damn, that's brutal. This was my best revenge. I went through an awful divorce. My ex-wife cheated on me, told lies about me, and all throughout the divorce I took the high road and I was there for my kids, while she disappeared off the face of the earth. Her birthday was only a couple of weeks after the divorce was final. As the kids were young, I was a good guy and purchased several presents from the kids to her. Among the gifts I bought was a necklace with a big red A at the end. Her first name is Anne. I had the kids give that to her and she wore her scarlet letter all around the town. Most people in our town knew what she had done, and some were even aware of the necklace. Yep, I made my adulterous ex-wife wear the scarlet letter. Why did you abandon your family? Where did you go? What's life like for you now? My cousin, shall we say, went for a walk once. He was dating this woman who was just an awful human being. She got pregnant, saw it was his, and once the kid was born, the state went after him for child support, as he wasn't on the birth certificate, even though they were living together. Anyways, the paternity test came back showing it wasn't his, and she flipped her lid. She just lost it. He asked her to calm down and said he wanted to take a walk to cool off. He left everything he owned, minus the clothes on his back and his wallet, and went for a walk that he never came back from. A few years back, the kid found him, the kid was 16 or 17, and went on some giant rant about him being a bum and a deadbeat and whatever other nonsense. My cousin just told him he wasn't his dad. The paternity test showed that, and he had no idea why she told him he was the father, so he'd just walked out. That kid left a hell of a lot more confused than when he showed up, I think. I've never left, but my brother has. One morning 2 years ago, I woke up with a killer hangover. I rolled over in bed, checked my phone, and saw several missed calls and a couple of voicemails from my mother and sister, along with a text message from my dad saying, "Call me." The first voicemail was from my sister, sobbing through the phone, and she said, "Tom just tried to self-delete. He wrote us all a letter and just call me, please." Whoa, this can't be real. Then my mum's voicemail. "Tom attempted to end things. We haven't been able to reach him, but we suspect he might be heading your way. If you see him, call the police. We need to make sure he's safe." Oh crap. This is definitely real. We all somewhat suspected depression from him, but this was unexpected. Anyways, I got out of bed and put some clothes on. I open the blinds and I peek out the window. As if on cue, Tom's crappy old 96 four-door just rolled up. He was flustered, he barely spoke to me, but told me he was leaving for California. Refusing to turn him into the police, I bought him lunch, filled up his gas tank, and then gave him all of the $26 I had on me and wished him luck. He was back home within 2 weeks, remorseful and embarrassed. I'm just glad he's back. I was living with a very mean and controlling girlfriend. If it wasn't her way or all about her, she just threw a fit. One day, I had enough and said I was going to the store, and I just kept driving. I literally drove off for 12 hours and showed up at a friend's house 5 states away and asked if I could crash on his couch. I called my boss and said I wanted to quit work. He was pretty cool about it. He knew my girlfriend and actually set me up with a job in my new city. I have not spoken to my ex since. Soon after my relocation, I met my now wife, and I could not be in a better relationship. Best thing I ever did. You know, this may well be one of the greatest bosses I've ever heard of. Fully went to bat for his employee, even after presumably being really inconvenienced by him just buggering off. I do have to say, on the limited information we have, going 5 states away because your partner is mean and controlling seems a bit extreme to me, but maybe you were mincing your words and she was the dangerous kind of controlling. My mum cornered me in the bathroom after chasing me around the house, told me to punch her, and when I tried to leave, punched me instead. I said I'd call the cops, and she said she'd do the same as she's done with my ex-stepdad. If I told them I punched her, it'd be her word versus mine. The next morning, I got into a broken Ford that was still in her name, even though it was mine, went to get the oil changed, asked the guy how long he thinks the car could make it. He said I'd be lucky to make it a block. It wouldn't go into reverse, amongst other things. All the same, I thought, I'm only going forward. 3 days later, I drove from California to Maryland and spent about 5 years without contact. I reconnected later, foolishly thinking that people could change. They don't. Last I heard from her, she wanted me to sign over my apartment in Russia so that she could sell it and give me the money. I told her I'd happily sign it over, but she didn't need to pretend she'd give me a dime. I've been working since the age of 12, albeit for much less than $8 an hour when I started. I did stuff like paper routes and things. I only reconnected because I have sisters, but let me tell you, the brainwashing she's done against me is more or less finished. Both of my sisters have deep-seated issues, one is pregnant at the age of 18, failing grades, and neither will take me up on my offers to help. I make like $50 an hour tutoring strangers. I'm the pariah who left and traveled the world. But apparently I'm a loser because, well, my mum. I was living with my parents. I was 17. They told me to leave, then tried to stop me from leaving. I've been in a horrible, bullying relationship with my mum and stepdad for years. Friends helped me load the car, and that was 12 years ago. Never went back. Lived in a horrible house with my horrible mum. I got a job after college, and in 3 months rented an apartment and went home. Took a garbage bag full of clothes and just booked it. She didn't want me to leave because she was taking all of my money. She'd take my car when I didn't pay her my full paycheck. I had to resort to pulling fuses when I parked because she'd hide my car on different streets trying to get me fired. Even in college, I had finals to graduate, and she took my car so I had no way to get there. I had to rent a car just to take my finals. God, the stories I could tell. Anyway, after I left, I waddled into the apartment with my garbage bag and nothing else, and slept on the floor and for the first time felt peace. Now I have a decent job, house, wife, and a kid. I ran away from my family, my mum and whatever family was attached to her, and I feel so much better. I resented the bullcrap my mum would pull on me. She once got me pretty screwed around and told everyone that I was physically attacking her, leeching her finances, among other things. She told me to my face that she was going to lie and get away with it, and she did. And that was pretty much the family dynamic I was caught up in. When I called her out on her behavior, she just couldn't handle it. It felt good to leave and not look back. I got a new job and a new place, and I changed numbers. My parents were split and just hated each other. They'd always put me in the middle. The substances and alcohol that they were both doing didn't help. I got kicked out of each of their places and went back and forth over some crappy circumstances, involving them both wanting all of my money to live with them, and them playing the guilt card on each other that they took me in when the other kicked me out. I got a steady job that I had to work 6 or 7 days a week at odd hours to get full-time at. 2 weeks before Christmas, my mum said her place wasn't a truck stop and I couldn't come and go at all hours of the night, and that I just had to leave. I'd heard similar from her before and didn't want to go to Dad's again, so I called some family and they all refused to take me in because my mum had called them and told them I was hitting her. Since I was still in the same house, I told her she was a horrible person but an even worse mother, and I left. My grandma luckily knew my parents were crazy, so she helped me as much as she could. I still get phone calls, emails, and Facebook messages from the others asking me when I'm going to stop being so selfish so we can be a family again. I've since seen both of my parents. I invited some friends through Facebook to events that they in turn invited my parents to. I finally nutted up and told them both to get the F out of my life. Mum still leaves me drunk or spaced out or crying voicemails in the middle of the night, either telling me she loves me or that I'm all that's wrong with her life. Dad sends me emails telling me to get the stick out of my butt because I'm still his son. I still spend time with my grandma. Friends' parents mean more to me than my own ever did. Now I've got a full-time job, an awesome dog, I work on doing better in life in general, and I'm trying to move into a place solo. Blood is not thicker than water. I will never speak to either of them again if I can help it. No regrets. I was the one that was left behind. My mum and my dad had a fight and my dad left, and then he decided he no longer wanted to be alive anymore. On one hand, I have no memories of him because I was too young, and I'm very sympathetic to mental illness and the idea of self-deletion ideation. I've had bouts of serious depression in my life. On the other hand, his absence, the lack of dad, left a huge gaping hole in my life. The strangest part is when I turned the age he was when he ended things. I'm 36 and I'm older than my dad ever was, and I still feel young, like I have many years ahead of me. I wish I had the opportunity to know him. Everything I know about him is somebody else's memory. I left my home just like this. One night, I just packed the essentials into my backpack, walked to a train station, and got on a train to Newport News, Virginia from Pasco, Washington. No one knew I was gone until 3 o'clock in the morning. It was to be with a girl my family was 100% against. That was a year ago, and it's all working perfectly. I'm happier now than I've ever been before. When I was about 19, I was in a crappy position. All of my friends were doing crystal regularly. I had put out thousands of dollars to bail friends from jail and to try to help them out. The girl I was dating was lying to everyone she knew about our relationship. My uncle called me in the middle of all this and offered me a job on the other side of the country. I had my car packed and I was heading there within 12 hours. I heard from the girl I was dating about 2 weeks later. She called crying, telling me she went to my house and I wasn't there, and wanted to know where I was. I told her I'd moved, and she told me it wasn't my choice to make, that I should have consulted her. I never heard from any of the people I'd considered friends. I heard some of them went to jail, some had kids, and some disappeared. I moved back to the town that I left about 5 years later, and everything has been relatively okay since then. Sometimes I see people I used to know, and sometimes they recognize me, but mostly I keep to myself and spend time with better people than those I left years ago. Yeah, honestly, you may have abandoned your friends instead of your family, but this sounds relevant. You were doing no harm and trying to make your life work there, but it was just beating you down, so you took your shot at a better life when it was offered to you. I'm happy you didn't get dragged down by your environment. I've always lived in a terrible home with both mental and physical mistreatment, and I never saw a proper way out. I started working at 14 years old in a convenience store for $8 an hour, and I hid all of the money I made in a locked container in a nearby wooded park area. I did this because my parents would have taken my money if they knew that I was working at all. By the time I'd turned 18, I had close to 10 grand saved up and I'd finished high school. I was supposed to start university that year, but early on in the summer, I waited until my parents went out to work, found and took all of my documents, unenrolled out of the university program I was supposed to be in, and left. I took a bus to Alberta, and I've been living there since, doing labor. It's been a year and a half, and they haven't searched for me yet, not that I'm aware of at least. How's my life now? Well, I'm poor, barely getting by, but at least I'm living alone and happier than I was before. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I left my family close to 5 years ago to move to California to start a new life. I was 400 pounds, living a lifestyle of prescription meds and drinking at 17 with my family. I was good in high school and even went to college early, but I wasn't able to secure a loan there to continue past the first year. I dropped my crap life there and came here. It was very rough for a time, but I'm a lot better now. I had some help from my adoptive father, but I paid my way aside from the ticket here. I live on my own now and I manage an office selling printer parts and various other moneymakers online. I started my own business last year and I've been paying out of pocket to continue school here because the college I went to back home wouldn't release my transcript. I've lost a great deal of weight and I'm away from any unhealthy addictions. My family is for the most part very angry with me. My mother died 12 years ago. I'd planned to go back for her birthday in 2013, but she died 2 weeks prior to that. The only regret I have is leaving that door open. I think she'd be proud of where I went. My mother left me at her door. I'd visit every Saturday for a few hours, then she just wasn't there. After more than 10 years of extreme hate towards her, my uncle enlightened me. He said, "Maybe she left you for the better." Turns out she has extreme mental issues, substance use. It's amazing how few words can change your life, really. My father just walked out on us when I was 9. He walked out on everything. He had racked up a load of debt before he went without my mother knowing, through a gambling habit he had which we didn't know about until immediately after, and the hounding from the people and companies that he'd borrowed money from. Some of them were the kinds of people you didn't really want to owe money to, and the next few years were pretty rough. To add to that, my mother got sick around the same time and ended up unable to leave her bed for a few years. I think the illness was caused or at least exacerbated by the shock of his leaving. Not going to lie, it was really rough. I ended up getting homeschooling, as they were afraid that he'd show up and pick me up from school one day. And after a little while of that, my confidence was so drained that I avoided school as much as possible. The police were looking for him and eventually found him a year or two in a town 200 miles away. But he didn't want to get in contact with anyone and nothing came of it. He was an ex-cop, so I guess he knew what to say or something. Then, a few years later, we got a phone call from a lady who had found his address book, informing us that he had died and she was looking for his next of kin. It ended with us traveling to where he had been staying to find an elderly lady that he was basically bleeding dry financially. Some of the stories he had been spinning to manipulate people were incredible. People there thought of him as a hero. He had told them about how he'd started a new life after nursing his sick wife with cancer until she passed away. They told us about how my brother had been inspired by his story and was working as a doctor abroad, and in these wild stories of his life, I never actually existed. I can't say I'm really angry about it. I grew up afraid that I'd end up like him, but I think when you're exposed to something like that as a child, you can either see it as an example of how to live, or you can look at it and do everything in your power to avoid that. I left my bullying, controlling husband 7 years ago. I just walked out the door. I never spoke to him again. I'd squirreled away money for years because he controlled my income. He had this idea that I was miserable because we didn't have children, so he tried to change that by committing the unspeakable act on me so I'd get pregnant. He didn't know that I was using birth control. I'd resigned my job, so I just left. I couldn't bring children into that life. I went to live with my parents in a different part of the country. Now I live in a different country. I have a kind and loving partner, and we have a daughter. I'm happy most of the time. My family don't tell people where I live in case he should find out. I don't know what happened to him. Hope he's dead. American that moved to Australia for 2 years. Got a girl pregnant, fell in love, saw her for the horrible person that she really was but stuck it out. After the baby was born, I had to be sure he was mine. The test came back showing no paternal match. I confronted her and we fought, and she swore up and down it was a bad test. Wanting to believe it, I scheduled another test for the 3 of us to go in. $800 later, 2 days before the test, she played dumb and said she had never agreed to that. Told me to get out of their life and that her child was not a science experiment. I stayed with a friend a couple of days and then came back. She just acted like nothing had happened and wanted to just move on. Another test was no longer an option in her book. After having a laptop broken over my head, a vacuum slammed on me while I was sleeping, and the brothers that she had filled with lies hot on my tail, I did what was necessary to defuse the situation. It was the hardest decision of my entire life, and it still makes me sick to think about. A week later, I scheduled a flight back to California. I've been back for 4 years now. We'd talked a bit over the year after I'd left, but just went back to her wanting to fight. After some antidepressants and heavy drinking, I'm finally starting to feel whole again. I look at the world very differently now. I was 21, on my 3rd year of college, getting drunk and taking pills every single night, throwing up every single morning, doing the deed with guy after random guy. I'd just had a termination, 98 pounds and barely scraping by in my classes. One day I woke up and felt so unbelievably sick and tired of the way I was living, I considered just ending things. But instead of self-deleting, I packed up as much as I could fit in my car while my housemates were in class and work and moved to North Carolina to live by the beach. I called my parents and told them what I was doing, which broke their hearts, which broke my heart. I still come home for some of the holidays. I stayed in a cheap, disgusting motel for 2 months before I saved enough at my waitress job to get an apartment 40 minutes from the beach. I'm currently married to a wonderful man, completely sober, finished my degree, and I have a baby due in December. I can truly say that I'm happy. Well, I hope your family forgave you. It seems like what you did changed your life for the better, no matter what anyone else could say. And although you might have temporarily really messed with your flatmates' lives for a bit, that is better than leaving behind dependents or kids. I left home shortly before high school graduation. Awful living situation. My parent was in town and told me to go home while she stayed there. I went home and packed my stuff and left. Returned the car with a note and nobody even bothered to call or text me for a week. When I was younger, with my mother, things were kind of rough. Pretty hellish, actually. Well, one time when I was in my mid-teens, things got really bad. It started when her sisters moved in. She treated us like slaves, we were expected to cook and clean for her, and just generally be at her beck and call. Well, this one particular night, I was expected to cook chicken for her and her boyfriend, and then clean it up and basically be her little kitchen servant so she could be the fancy lady. This teed me off no end. I was expected to not only cook a meal that I wasn't allowed to eat, then I had to clean up and do the dishes for that meal for some guy I'd never met just so that she could get some. What the frick, I refused. It turned into a big fight. So, when my mother came home, she got mad at me. Things got pretty physical, but that wasn't even the worst part. That I was used to. She slapped me across the face with a slipper. That was far from the most painful thing she'd done, but for some reason it was new and it pushed me over the edge. I silently took it and went to bed. The next morning I poured out my book bag. I packed a few things that meant something to me. It still boggles my mind, just picking a few things that are important into the bag in the span of 15 minutes. It changes the way you think about things if you've ever had to do that. So anyway, I packed a few things and went to school. As soon as I got there, I found a quarter, God knows where, and I called a cab. It's funny now because I had to get the operator to dial because I was upset and couldn't figure out how to do it. I went to my grandmother's in the next town over. I didn't have 5 cents to my name. She might not have even been home, but I went. When I got there, I told her I took a cab and I wasn't going back. She, of course, called my mum, who told my grandmother, and I quote, "Tell him he no longer has a mother." So I lived with my grandmother, switched schools, and nobody ever hit me again. Well, until my drunk dad moved in, but that's another story. Grandma was my hero. She was always there for me. I used to look at the lights from my bedroom window and wish I was there with her. She died April 21st of 2015. It was really hard. My entire life from the point of 15 to 37 was devoted to her, and now she's gone. At night I still look at the lights, but this time they're the stars in the sky, and I wish I was with her. My parents were and are religious fanatics and complete narcissists with their own special brand of Christianity. They homeschooled me my entire life until I was 17, at which point they kicked me out due to religious disagreements. I had to eventually come crawling back to worse conditions, but with a plan. I saved money and stole my documents. I told my parents I was going for a hike in the woods for a few days. Instead, I took a flight to Europe and joined the French Foreign Legion. They figured I was dead for a few weeks, but eventually they figured out what I'd actually done. It's been almost 2 years, and I'd still rather not see them ever again, but one of these days I'm going to have to go back and see all of my younger brothers who still live there. Basically, I decided I had nothing better to do and life was boring as heck, so I might as well do something stupid or crazy. So I just left and never looked back. Whether or not I'm better off now than I was before is debatable, but at least I can say I've done something with my short little life. What elite-level skill do you have that makes people uncomfortable? Remembering things about people. I have lied about not knowing things to not seem too much like a creep. Remembering somebody else's schedule. Walking with minimal sound. I creep up on people all the time. I don't mean to, but I make almost no sound when I walk. I'm the same way. I make my wife scream all the time by walking into a room without her noticing. It happens so often that when our son was somewhere between 1 or 2, he also started screaming whenever I walked into a room. He just thought that was a thing we did in our family. It happens to other people outside of home too. I start talking to people and they jump out of their skin. There was a restaurant in a Hyatt hotel that had a casino. The waiter from that restaurant remembered our preference when we showed up with a friend 6 months later. You guys were either amazingly awesome restaurant patrons or a freaking nightmare. I'm a former waitress and bartender turned RN. The same thing happens with patients. Counting bills quickly. I learned when in Uzbekistan, a place where the highest denomination was at 1,000, but a meal at a restaurant cost 20 to 30k. Retail management without machines can do the same. The bigger stores all have bill counters and weigh their change. Remembering oddly specific details about someone's past. I tend to remember the odd crap people say for years, and it tends to freak them out. The worst reactions are when someone was just making something up for a story and have no memory of saying it in the first place. This is me. I remember conversations, jokes, dates, hangouts, text messages, meme exchanges, and so on and so forth. And it is weird when ages have passed and I make a joke or say like, hey, like that one time we were talking about X, and they have zero idea because it was literally 18 months ago. I've also bought gifts for people based off this stuff and they just end up confused and not sure of the relevance. Yeah, the narrator is also one of those weirdos. I'll forget any number of important things, like what I'm meant to be doing, where my keys are, paying my bills, passwords, or my day-to-day schedule, but hot damn if I can't just randomly remember specific jokes or one-liners that my friends did from a decade ago. Honestly, I think I'd be happier just remembering that other stuff. Being able to quickly convert between ounces and grams, 16 ounces to a pound, 20 more to a kilo. I have a friend who could memorize numbers, especially plates of vehicles. He'd then be able to recall it after months in totally random conversations. Many people asked how he'd know he wasn't bluffing. Here's the thing. I know this guy from college. You can imagine how all of us would have gone to lengths to verify such things. Also, it works out to be useful in many situations, and he'd be somewhat of a personal Google to a few of us. Like, hey, I can't seem to find this guy's number. Do you remember? Noticing cameras. A friend of mine does that. He can point out any camera in public spaces. I developed a similar skill while playing Ingress. Portals are everywhere. Strep throat tests. I used to get strep throat a lot as a kid, so by the time I was tested for it as a 20-year-old, I had the process down. They stick in the big popsicle stick to hold down your tongue, and then they swab the back of your throat while you try not to gag. Well, I happened to be tested by a relatively new, young, attractive doctor this particular time, and when he complimented me on doing well on the test and not gagging, my response was, "Thanks, I've had practice." If not suspicious, it was at the very least mortifying after realizing the implication of what I'd said. As a nurse who's always performed these, any adult that could do a throat swab with zero gag, cough, or flinch always made me wonder. I've forgotten my apartment key so many times to the point where I can pick my own lock. People find that suspicious. So you'd remember to take your lockpick kit with you, but not your keys? I mean, a lockpick kit works on a lot of doors, but their key will only open one. Being able to recognize pills. No, I'm not a dealer. I just work in a pharmacy and some of them are very recognizable. Remembering things about them that they forgot. I told my friend I was getting a job at a store we knew. She told me, I think I've been there before. Then I told her she has, and I repeated the conversation we had word for word. I got some weird looks from her. I'm good at stuff like that. My friend and I were talking about a hike and I mentioned that we've already done it. She said we hadn't yet. So I told her the approximate date and what we did before and after and what we talked about on it. And yet if you asked me what I had for dinner yesterday, I would struggle. Staying calm. The trick is being so overwhelmingly numb and devoid of emotion that you just aren't invested in the outcome. Getting kids to trust me within seconds of meeting me. I'm a pediatric nurse. That seems like a useful skill to have, but there's no way I'm going to have how to get kids to trust me within seconds of meeting me in my Google search history. In case anyone is genuinely interested, kids are smarter than adults take them for and have a keen sense of when someone's only interacting with them out of enlightened self-interest. The main way to get kids to trust you is to interact with them and respect their agency, and for them to understand that all of your interactions with them are only for their best interest. Kids can totally pick up on the vibes of people who see them as cute stuffed animals or whatever rather than as humans who deserve a level of respect. My source? Experience as a head lifeguard, digital English tutor, and karate instructor. Microsoft Excel. I found that by taking over reporting from others because it took them so much time. I'd automate it to pull from the databases where the previous owner was spending 2 hours a day of copying and pasting hundreds of cells. A couple of hours work once, and I hit a button. Done. I'd use it to release right away, even with a script to open, refresh, save, and email it. This caused people to not trust the numbers, so now I still pull all the data, but I hold off on releasing it for a bit, and even a bit late on occasion. I see people wanting to learn Excel. I did a lot of trial and error learning. I'm in my mid-50s, so I have some time under my belt. Learning a simple programming language helps. I learned BASIC as a kid and Pascal and Fortran later. VB is the most useful at this point though. In Excel, you can add a developer tab, Google it, it will show you how to add it to your Excel. You can record macros that record your steps when you do things like insert a column, copy a row and stuff. You can then see how it works. Mr. Excel, not to be confused with Miss or MS Excel, is a great resource. Also, learn VLOOKUPs as they're very helpful and you can get how other formulas work. Cleaning liquid spills. If Junior knocks over their glass or the cat gets too close and personal with the fish tank, most people just tend to throw a bathroom towel over it or get out the wet vac. Not super effective and it tends to allow time for staining. Some salt, aerosolized carpet foam, and some paper towels will clean up anything like it was never there and in record speed, and all for the low price of making people uncomfortable as they imagine you as a mob cleaner. For extra points, use these same methods to clean blood out of carpets or off cheap porous tiles. People's faces are funny as heck. Man, where was this blood cleaning advice when I needed it last month? The premise of this video is literally how the series Psych starts. The main character, Sean Spencer, is too good at being observant, and because he kept sending tips to the local police, they called him in for questioning because they thought he might be involved in all these crimes, so he has to pretend to be a psychic. I can't recommend the show Psych enough, guys, it's terrific. Walking quietly. There's a couple of you freakily stealthy weirdos in this video, huh? My old flatmate is one of those. I swear the amount of times that man has slowly apparated behind me, asked me if I've seen the scissors or something, and turned a bunch of my hairs grey defies belief. Being unbothered by blood and guts. I'm a veterinarian. I've spent days up to my elbows in all manner of bodies and parts and fluids. I can watch surgery or necropsy videos over lunch. I did an eye surgery on Tuesday and somebody had to catch the new kid. The big ones aren't allowed to get faint, it's very inconvenient. As a related aside, when a nice young lady at the bank says, "Oh my god, there's blood on your shirt," assuring her that it isn't your own, in fact, offers no reassurance. Shuffling cards. Yep, that one time you show that you can deal from the bottom, suddenly you're out at the weekly poker game. When you instinctively go to private search on your phone. I use my private search for everything except my adult movies. If Google's gonna track my data, then Google can watch me whack the mule. Hiding things. Well, I meant keeping secrets just as much as I meant physically hiding things. Knowing a friend's schedule, especially for close friends. I've remembered their schedules just from them randomly bringing up what classes they have in conversations. Fabricating stories. I had a workmate that used to do that all the time while I was on the International Space Station. I will remember your car and every detail about your car before I can remember your name. People that are able to drastically change their personality or the way they talk and act when around different groups of people or someone else arrives. For me, it's a coping mechanism that I developed from a childhood of mistreatment and neglect. You have to be a different person to avoid the triggers, and sometimes it just catches you as an adult. Lying. And I'm not talking like the everyday white lies of like, "How are you? I'm fine." No, I mean the Kaiser Soze kind of lying. I am super good at lying when the need arises. Like very good on the spot, and it freaked out an old friend of mine. I'm just super creative and I have a worst-case scenario mind, so I can think of a lot of possibilities. Lockpicking. My friend got locked out, so I grabbed the bobby pins out of my hair and just started picking away. He thought I was a criminal. It was a master lock. Googling, oddly. People find it very unsettling how quickly I can learn stuff that untrained people aren't supposed to know. All I did was Google search until I found the info and then gave it a try. Avoiding people. Everyone assumes that I'm up to something because I spend so much time alone and out of sight. Looking left, then right, then left, then right without turning your head. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Moving through unreasonably tight and cluttered spaces normally. My friends and I used to hang out at an extremely cluttered warehouse that belonged to a hoarder friend. It was full to the point where moving at all without getting stuck on something or causing a garbage avalanche was difficult. And there I was, just gliding through hills of hoarded garbage like some kind of ghost. They told me it was creepy. Being happy. Everyone always thinks I'm on something. I mean, I am, but I'm happy for other reasons too. Telling almost instantly by feel if a bill is real or counterfeit, though I think more people should definitely be able to do this. Lower denomination US counterfeit bills can look amazing, but the feel is just always off. Guessing passwords. I had a video games addiction during my young age. My parents changed the password once a week because I kept guessing it. When they say a word in a weird way, paying close attention to their facial expressions, listening to their tapping, the sound of the keyboard, they're all things that help me. But the key is to know how that person thinks. I'm also able to remember most passwords that I've seen once inadvertently. Navigating government bureaucracy. They're penetrating the bureaucracy, Bob! Speaking French. There's always something suspicious about people who can speak French fluently. So this is why some people think that I am suspicious. Go to any public place in Ottawa and it's mind-boggling. People will have conversations where one guy says something in English and the other guy responds in French, then a third guy switches back and forth several times every sentence. I don't know how they do it or what they're all up to. Knife sharpening. I don't think knife sharpening in itself is suspicious. However, it depends if you're sitting on the porch doing it and just impassively making eye contact with the people who rock up to your house. That behavior has some connotations. I think someone who uses knives a lot, like a woodworker, butcher, or chef, that's fine. Thugs? Like, how often does a thug stab a guy? Like once a month? That's not nearly as much as a butcher. Yeah, it can be super creepy when you're into knives. I enjoy kitchen knives. I read about them a lot. I have a collection. I'm fairly good at knife work and I sharpen regularly. And people think I'm a serial killer. My friends and I played this drinking game where you take the paper bag from the store, put it on the floor standing up, and you have to bend down on one foot and grab it with your teeth. Each round you trim a few centimeters off the top and keep lowering the bag until there's a winner. One of my very unathletic friends at the time would easily win every round. It would just be him, and he was flexible enough to get the bag only 6 inches off the ground. People were super impressed, and I joked, it's all of that practice from sucking your own eggplant. And the look he gave me, combined with the awkward laugh, made me think I might have been closer to the truth than I would have hoped. Being able to recite the alphabet backwards with speed. Tying knots. I can untie them really fast. I can even untie a jumble of earphones in the dark or with my eyes closed. I don't know if this is the same suspicion as being able to tie the knots or not. Tearing boxes. I had a female coworker who knew how to tear huge boxes like it was nothing. Like in 2 seconds, there's nothing left out of the box. First time she did it, she got a lot of strange looks. She probably worked fast food or maybe a grocery store. I mean, I got really good at breaking down boxes at McDonald's in high school. Fairly easy to do with your bare hands if you know how. Meat trimming. Breaking into someone's car. A few years ago, I was new at a job and a coworker locked her keys in her car. I got the door open in under a minute. The security guard watched me and had some concerns with the speed at which I'd opened that car without damaging it. The truth of the matter is that the guard wasn't paying attention completely to what I was doing. My first car was a 2-door sports car, and I learned about a design flaw with those cars when my idiot self locked my keys in the ignition. She had a similar car and her keys were in the ignition, so I took advantage of that design flaw to get her door open without damage to the car. I drove multiple different vehicles in my youth and locked myself out of each and every one of them. As such, I also became proficient in unlocking all cars. It really weirded a few people out and made a few people think I'm some sort of criminal, but I wouldn't change a thing as it allowed me to save a baby one time. I was working at a pawn shop, and the mum accidentally shut the door while removing her TV from the back seat, with the baby still in the car. In a panic, her and my manager and a few good customers all tried to help her as I finished up with my customer. 15-ish minutes later, when I finished my work, I heard the mother freaking out on the phone as the soonest anyone could come unlock her car was 50 minutes. I ran outside and unlocked the car in 1 minute flat, came back in and told the lady she could cancel the rescue and hang up now as the other guardian came in behind me carrying the baby. The mother was so happy she gave me a hug with so much love and appreciation that I'll never forget. Also, she gave me $20, which I said was unnecessary, but she insisted $20 for a quick rescue was the lowest she was willing to go after she got quoted $60 for the 50-minute job. Recognizing sounds. I've knowledge of pretty much everything happening around me through the sounds. That's the same for me, but it's the scent. If someone says they can smell smoke, I can tell them it's the smell of house insulation burning. Being a good listener. People just kind of assume that you're a stalker. Cleaning out stains. I cut my hand pretty badly once and blood got into my white shirt. I tried to clean it myself, but the stain never got out. I told my mum, who told me to bring it back with me when I came back for Christmas break, and she cleaned it. And by the way, she didn't even bleach it. Her ability to clean stains so well since then has been suspicious to me. Salt will get almost anything out of anything. Using your peripherals. I've become really good with mine. Another answer is looking back and forth. When multiple people stare at me, I look at one person, then the next, and repeat until they either ask me what I'm doing or they stop staring at me. Remembering things for other people. I pick up random things in conversations, not necessarily in conversation with me. I like to listen. I'll wish you good luck on that special thing tomorrow. I'll tell you happy birthday. I'll tell you not to forget something. It's saved myself and people around me from getting into crappy situations. Imagine a guy at work who tells you not to forget your wife's birthday next week. Yeah, I'm that guy. ADD has taught me to remember the things that I pay attention to. I'm very good at getting detailed information in my peripheral vision. I don't have to be looking directly at someone to study them. It makes me sound like a prevert, but it's a skill I developed because of working and living in situations where letting someone know that you're watching them can have bad consequences. But so is being ignorant of what they were doing. It's really frickin' handy. Also, somewhat related, reading upside down has had its benefits. Being able to strike up a rapport with random people. After someone else sees you do it, they act like you're a weird Jedi or something. Top-notch marksmanship. Again, I think context is important here. I think if you're just a guy with an above-average score at the local range, nobody will notice. If you shoot 5 perfect kill shots in a row and then make a slowly, deeply satisfied noise at the end, and then make eye contact with someone, yeah, you've probably just lost a person who will hang out with you. Spatial awareness. I can look at something and tell you whether or not it will fit into a wall, into a box or car, through a hallway or stairwell. I was at a shipping store a few months ago and a guy was in line behind me trying to figure out which size box to get for the box he was trying to fit into it. I pointed at a specific size and said, "That one, but only if you put your box in this side up." It slid in perfectly and he gave me the weirdest look. Somehow though, I always seem to bump into the corners of tables. Pouring the perfect amount of milk into a bowl of cereal. This is so complex and I love it. Finding a lot of information about someone online, given a small amount of information about said person to go off. I'm known for this among my friends and they think it's creepy as frick, but it's surprisingly easy and honestly useful. Speaking fluent foreign language with someone with no explanation before or after. An old co-worker of mine, my partner on the ambulance, spoke fluent Chinese with a patient and their family. In China, this would probably be a no biggie, but being in Ohio and me not knowing she knew anything more than English was very weird. She just acted like it was normal. Good at finding purposefully hidden items. Thanks to my parents hiding my devices when I was a kid. I even put them back after I used them. It got to the point where I had to watch out for small stuff like specifically placed objects, which are essentially traps my parents put to see if I opened something up to get it. It ranged from hairpins to even clean-wiped surfaces and more. Lying. Wait, no, that's wrong. The better you are, the less likely anyone notices. The problem comes up when you use your skills to help somebody out, and they later remember just how effective and seamless your cover story was. In my line of work, sales, there's a method called mirroring, where you try to mimic the customer's tone and energy to be more relatable. I've spent many years trying to read people, and I'm introverted as it gets. So I like to think I do this very well, with my fellow men being the easiest to read. Well, my employer noticed this and started referring to it as an advanced sales tactic. They pulled me into a Zoom with other employees who suck at closing sales and had me try to teach it to them. Anything with a computer. If you're good enough, with literally anything to do with computers, people will think you're able to hack computers. They also think you're able to fix any problem with their computers, which is equally detrimental on its own. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.